Okay, my apologies. Meeting come to order, please. Any public comments?
David, you just have to announce that Mary is...
Oh, yeah, okay. Do we first have to do something or not? She had this whole little procedure.
Yeah, I got
right?
it right here. It's just, we need the quorum.
Okay.
So she can just announce that she's...
The chair must announce the name of any members participating remotely. I'd like to record that Mary Storrs is participating remotely. A quorum must be physically present. Just made it, huh? Okay. Mary, will you say hello so we can hear you?
Hello, David.
Okay.
Lovely to be here.
Great. Okay. With that, any public comments? Okay, hearing none. Move to review the minutes of the meeting of October 10th, 2018. Any comments?
I had a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
From Steve. This is where we were discussing communication between the regional school and Carlisle school. I just want to clarify the third and fourth sentence. This kind of is maybe was a misinterpretation or not exactly in the spirit of what I was kind of trying to convey when I brought this up. So what I really was trying to convey was referencing those warrant articles and the issue that we had at the time. How could we be more forward-thinking about better communication, when something like this comes up, so.
Would you like to suggest a rephrasing?
Yeah, I can just send that to you.
Okay. Any other comments? Mary, do you have comments on the minutes of, were you at the meeting of October 10th?
I wasn't, but I watched most of the video. I don't have any comments on the minute.
Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? Motion to accept?
Did somebody make a motion?
Not yet.
I move to accept the minutes as printed and modified by Linda.
I second.
Roll call vote.
Doors aye.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Kablotsky, aye.
Can Mary vote on the minutes if she wasn't present?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So moved. Next item is the PTO grants presentation. Are you guys not representing the PTO?
I am speaking on behalf of the
Okay.
PTO. They're very pleased to be able to present the school with $10,000 worth of PTO grants. They fully funded 4 of them, and they partially funded 5 others. Do you want me to read them, or you have them in the back?
Why don't you read them out for the audience?
SEL Library for grades 3 and 4, fully funded. K through 2 Social Emotional Book Library, grades K through 2, fully funded. Building a Phonetic Library, grade 3, fully funded. Classroom Library Books, grade 7, fully funded. Building a Classroom Library, grade 3, partially funded. Guided Reading Books, grade K, partially funded. PTO Read Across America for all grades, partially funded. Ukuleles in Carlisle for grade 6, partially funded. And activity stations, pre-K through 5, partially funded.
Very good. And we thank the PTO for their work. Motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Kablotsky, aye.
Doors aye.
Very good. Thank you so much to the PTO, who's not here in person, but are in people, but we gratefully accept. Next up is Kevin and Valerie. Are you going to talk about the upcoming concert field trip? Thank you. Sit there and the camera can follow. Ms. Mustafi, where are your young operators today?
She's outside
And the backup operator?
studying for SATs.
I thought he took those already.
No, he's December 5th, I think. or
Okay.
December
What was the driving to the test business?
I think that was like PSAT, so
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's coming.
Okay.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. We would like to make a proposal to take the middle school chorus, a non-auditioned group of a little over 70 members, and the concert band, an auditioned group of about 50 members, on an overnight performance trip. We think that taking our students to perform and to work with clinicians outside of school is a really valuable experience. And we know as musicians that when you perform with people that you know and care about, you perform better. And we think the added bonus of team building during these days would be really important. We also realize that it's hard to miss school time. And so we found a time that minimizes that. On March 26th, we have a half day, and then it's followed by parent conferences, and the 27th is no school for students. So students would only miss half a day of school. On here you can see the basic itinerary. We would travel to Plymouth to work at Plymouth State University with really excellent clinicians. This would also give students the chance to hear college ensembles and talk to college music majors and learn about what that's like to study music beyond middle school and high school. After that, we would travel to Worcester, and we would be able to perform in Mechanics Hall, which is known for its amazing acoustics and space. We also would go to a Brown Bag Lunch concert that day to hear the U.S. Army Band, so not only would our students be performing, but they would be exposed to live music, both choral and band.
So, having done some of these trips before with students, I can speak of just when they come back, the experience of playing with each other is just heightened. And oftentimes when we're on these trips, the students reach a different level of musicianship. I remember my first one, we went to Manhattanville College. Terry Reynolds was our clinician. And he spoke just about the music making experience, because a lot of times our students, when they've gone to festival, they're centered around something about what are we achieving here. And his quote, and I still remember to this day, and I'll probably remember for the rest of my life, was, "What's better than a gold medal?" And he said, "Goosebumps." And as I'm saying it, I'm getting goosebumps, because it's just that music experience. When you get that feeling, it doesn't happen very often, it's just amazing. So having that experience is just absolutely fun, fabulous. A few details that I'm sure come up as well. We've already spoken to Lauren Sawyer. She's agreed to come in attendance as a school nurse. Where to offset the cost, the Citrus Sale fundraiser, which is still open and available if you'd like to place an order. We bought order forms. You can absolutely take an order form with us. But we hope to offset that by $50 to $75. On the flip side, we did a breakdown of what the cost of the trip would be. Based upon the number of students being 100, that's roughly 2 years ago when we took the band and choir, our numbers were similar and some dropped out. And so we based it upon 100 students attending, breaking it down per student. The buses, we've quoted 3 different companies. The one of the best rate that came back is listed here. So it breaks it down to the hotels, which additional rooms for the chaperones, which would be primarily parents. Breaking it down to 2 chaperones per room. Our bus drivers will need a room, and the nurse would need a room as well. So that's why you see the additional rooms along with 4 students per room. The Mechanics Hall rental, which includes the hall itself, a piano rental, tuning, as well as recording. They have a sound technician that comes out to $3,000. We budgeted money for our clinicians in there. Food, we haven't identified the specific places that we went, but the line when we went to Vermont with a similar timeline, it was $50 per student roughly. I think it ended up being a little bit less. And then with performing at Mechanics Hall, different things that will incur would be we have to rent a truck to transport our percussion equipment and our stands, because that's not something that they have in-house. You bring your own with that. And then that's basically where we're at with the breakdown. It comes down to, with no offset of cost, if we go with 2 buses, meaning we have the numbers, the buses are 56 per, so if we're at that 100 with 12 chaperones, we're basically everywhere. And that's what we did last time, it was 205. But if we do have to go to 3, it's 236. But if we do have to go to 3, that means more students are coming. That will drive down the cost per student. So you're looking under $200 with offsetting of $50 to $75 per student.
So question, Kevin.
Sure.
Because the two locations are not really geographically coincident, in fact, you're coming back to
Yep.
Worcester, is the idea of a 2-day trip more of a bonding? Because you could do 2 separate day trips, right?
That's definitely a big piece of it.
Yeah.
It's also as far as with the nurse, with the Massachusetts license.
Yeah.
Staying in a hotel in Massachusetts is one thing that we have to have a Massachusetts nurse with us. Certainly the bonding is a big piece of it. But then in the morning, getting everybody together in the same location when they're already there. I just foresee logistical problems if we did come back.
Well, they might not be this 2 days next to you. I'm just saying, it's kind of 2 separate trips that you're putting together with a hotel stay, which, again, for bonding, it sounds fine, but for logistics, doesn't make sense, because it could be one day, take a day trip to Plymouth, and another day, take a day trip.
So the tie piece would be the music that we're performing, because we're working with the clinicians that are gonna better our groups.
Yeah.
And then we take that to Mechanics Hall, so it's ramping up
I
to,
see.
okay, let's
Okay.
work on
So it's
what
a
we do
package,
in Mechanics Hall,
Yeah.
and then take it to another level.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
A few questions, but first I want to thank you for the great job you both do in educating our kids about music, but more importantly, inspiring them and exciting them about music. It sounds like a good trip. I have some of the same concerns as Dave in terms of why is this one trip instead of 2 trips, or why not come back to Carlisle at night? We regularly have trips that leave in the morning, sometimes very early, going to Worcester. You probably would have to leave that early. It's not like either place is that far away. Many of the parents have commutes longer than these trips are. So, would you consider changing it to whether it be consecutive 2 days or 2 day trips separated by 1 or more days?
Well, I think the timeline of not having students miss school would be important. And also being able to have that intensive day of rehearsals and focusing on the music for so long and then performing it the next day, I think would lead to a better performance. So I think the dates make a lot of sense for those 2 reasons.
So that's the reason I have them consecutive.
Yeah,
What's
and
the reason
then the
not to have
mindset
the
as
kids
far
home?
as for the kids to stay together, because ultimately, in my mind, if we have a drop off and then you have another, you go home, you've now kind of broken that trip up, and it truly does feel like 2 separate trips. So, but when you're on it as a start and then you finish in the second day, you're there the whole time, and both your mind and physically there, and then you're also bonding with your fellow bandmates, your fellow choir mates, and it's just that piece of it is ideal. I mean, a lot of the tie-in as far as what we've experienced some difficulty, truth be told, is the nurse of having, when we go out of state, how we're able to do that.
So we can't go out of state unless it's overnight?
Well, with overnight, what I've been in 2 trips, that it's been difficult to have a nurse that is able to stay with us because of the Massachusetts license. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but if you're a Massachusetts nurse, what's been explained to me is that you're now under Massachusetts license, but if they would say we would stay in New Hampshire, there with the Massachusetts license now in New Hampshire, that license doesn't carry over the border, is my understanding.
Can you explain, I don't understand why that would, I can understand why you would not want to stay in New Hampshire that night because of it. That doesn't explain why you wouldn't want to bring the kids back home for that night when a nurse wouldn't be necessary. Are you saying that the nurse can't travel for the day to New Hampshire?
No, they can, so, and then, but to come back and then not break the trip up. I mean, one of the things that we've done before, when we traveled to New York, we stayed in New York.
Yes.
And we were able to make that work, and that's ideal. This was a way to come back, as far as to make it possible to stay.
Okay. Another question for you. I understand the middle school choir is a non-audition group, and you're taking the whole thing. The concert band is an audition group. What was the rationale behind the selection of those 2 groups as opposed to any other combination of choral and band groups that you might have had?
Sure, for me it's numbers. Right now my advanced choir, which would be an auditioned group, is a lot smaller. And while it would be great to provide those 13 students with another opportunity, I think I'd be missing out And I think the kids that I really want to target and inspire them more would be in the bigger ensemble. So I think this would be a better opportunity for those, especially some I know are really passionate singers but don't do advanced choir because they're also in CYP and all these other places. And so I think it would be a better opportunity to give this experience to more students.
Is everyone in the advanced choir also in the
Yes.
local choir? Okay.
Yeah.
And then for me, the concert band, it's basically the same answer for different reasons. Currently, my symphonic band is over 110, so that would be a large group to manage in such a setting. And with a 50-piece band, size-wise, to connect with other places, we fit better. So, I mean, that's a big reason, a part of it, so.
This is Mary. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Kevin, I know, and I think Valerie, we've taken students to Vermont and New York for similar trips. You're willing to step up and do it again. I guess that tells me they went very well. Is that fair?
Absolutely. They were very successful, and I can speak to, I have a student that's a senior in high school. He continued playing in high school, but then as things happened, he didn't continue, but I still stay in contact with him, and he still speaks about the trip as being one of the moments that he remembered in middle school. And just, I mean, that statement alone, I just think is so important for kids. I think it transcends the music. I think it transcends where we're going, where we're staying. It's just having that moment that you remember and can attach in a positive way just means everything to a kid. I mean, go ahead.
Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Those are the things I remember. I mean, I don't remember the times that we go to festivals. Sure, I remember the performance, but I remember all those different moments on the trips where they connected. I mean, I remember one of my moments that I remember at first trip was seeing kids just kind of in some downtime. They were running around on basically a field, and they were interacting with each other in a way you wouldn't see. Fifth graders interacting with eighth graders, quiet kids coming out of their shell, and it's just so powerful, and that they have those connections.
I couldn't agree more, Kevin. As you know, the parent of a child that's been on similar trips, there's nothing like them. You know, whether it's a sport or music or what have you, those kinds of trips are really important. And I love the fact that the two of you are willing to offer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no, that was going to be my question about the past, experiences with these trips. I think it sounds really great.
Great, sounds great. So do we vote to accept?
We usually wait till the next.
Can you wait till the next meeting?
We can. I mean,
Okay. Well, then, thank you for presenting. Sounds exciting.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, CEF, please come forward.
Right? So we updated our website this
Thank you.
weekend to include a little background on the mistake room and
Yep.
and all that, and so we thought it might be helpful just to have a little crib sheet.
Okay, that sounds great.
Sorry, this is Mary. If you wouldn't mind letting me know who's speaking and speak a little bit louder. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Sarah Wilson.
I'm Susie Shaw.
And we are speaking on behalf of the CEF. And we're addressing the issue of the mistake room. So since at least 2008, there's been talk about the fact that the school's instrumental band program, while an integral part of the Carlisle school experience, and one for which the school receives a lot of recognition, it doesn't have a proper home. It currently meets in the front or back of the auditorium, and about a quarter of band rehearsals are displaced by other activities. There's insufficient instrument storage and inadequate practice space for private lessons or small groups. And as former Superintendent Doyle said in 2008, we might get used to doing it this way, but that doesn't mean it's the best thing. Unfortunately, in 2011, there was not a suitable way to add a band room into the Spalding project, despite much administration support and appreciation for the need. The CEF supports the instrumental band program at CPS and wants to see the completion of the fine arts facility on our campus. And so with that in mind, we've been working with the school since early 2017 to explore the potential use of the 1,400 square foot mistake room. And this began with a feasibility study that the CEF funded in spring of 2017, done by TBA Architects of Concord, which showed two options for the mistake room. A two-floor solution that would nearly double the available square footage, but would require the installation of an elevator to access the mezzanine level and would not allow sufficient ceiling height and subsequent room volume to make any of the space appropriate for band rehearsal use. The other option, a one-floor solution, would offer the height and volume and dimensions needed for a rehearsal space, plus still allow for adjacent practice rooms and instrument storage. The school, TBA, and CEF concurred that consideration must be made for the instrumental music program as the primary beneficiary of any added space. And in January, we presented the school committee the feasibility study and highlighted this option 1B that as the first choice option for the proposed conversion, based on instrumental band director Kevin Mayer's preference for this option and our own understanding of programmatic needs. CEF has spoken with the administration about beginning this process as soon as possible, with the expectation to have the work completed the end of the coming summer holiday, so that the space will be ready for use in the 2019-2020 school year. We've discussed this with TBA, who believe that this is a reasonable goal if we can complete the bidding process for both architect and engineering services and contractors by March at the latest, a process that could take up to 3 months. This would give the selected contractor sufficient time to line up workers and materials. And for that reason, we are asking the school committee to vote today in support of the CEF going forward with this process. We'd also like to ask in advance for permission to offer donors recognition through the use of naming rights. As the design process advances, we will explore options, whether we have a donor plaque made, or naming rights to rooms, or any other unique naming opportunities. And in accordance with the facilities naming policy, we'd work with members of the school committee to approve naming opportunities and come back to the school committee with any final naming products before they're installed. We hope to see many members of the community at the upcoming community chorus and band concert that we're organizing to support this project.
On November 29th, in the auditorium.
7 p.m.
So Kevin Mayer will be performing.
Thank you.
Linda, you want to start?
Well, thank you for all the work that's been done on this. I reviewed it, and I think it's great. I think, you got input from Kevin, obviously, about, the usability of the space and its adequacy for his needs, and it sounds like, it's, all the homework has been done, so.
Okay. Mary?
So I actually have several questions, and I want to preface them by saying I'm biased towards music and band, if you haven't figured that out already, because my child has a great opportunity in the Carlisle and the Concord Carlisle High School. So I just want to be very clear. I'm not trying to roadblock anything. I think this is wonderful, but I just have some questions I want to make sure get discussed, and perhaps they already have been. So my first one is, I guess it's really for you, Jim, or the full committee, have we decided that this is the best use of the space?
Well,
is it fair to say we vetted that last year, right?
2 years ago. So the conversation started when I first came, 2016, 2017. And I think it was identified as a big need. There was also an additional need I think we discussed because the health P department needed some exercise instructional space also, which was kind of why we were looking at the two-story approach where we can maybe meet a couple of different needs at the same time. But alas, that proved to be too costly a challenge. And this seems like it does. It makes the most sense at this time to get the biggest impact for the programs that need it right now.
Can I add to that? Not only would it have been twice as expensive, but it actually, the space that would remain for the band program, if the volume of the room was cut in half, wouldn't be sufficient. One of the problems that the band has right now is so they perform in either the rear of the auditorium or on the stage. In the rear of the auditorium, if you close the partition, the space is so confined that actually it violates, I think, OSHA rules in terms of adequate, acceptable levels of decibels, and so it would cause hearing damage. And that's why Kevin often leaves the partition open, because with a full band in there, it's too loud. And so you'd have the same problem if you ended up with a two-floor solution.
And so what you're saying is that this space, the proposed space, would be
This one
ideal
has,
for...
this actually meets, if you look around and see what are like the ideal dimensions for a rehearsal space, this meets it for a 40 to 50 person band, so for the concert band or half of the symphonic band at a time. It meets the volumetric requirements, because you want a rectangle, you don't want a square. You want a rectangle with at least a 30% difference between the length and the width. And you'd end up in this case with a room that's about 45 by 22, 23 feet. And then an extra sort of 15 by 22 for rehearsals and for little practice and storage area with a 22-foot ceiling. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mary, more questions?
Yeah, so kind of a bigger picture question is how are we managing this as a construction project, right? Because this is a school project. And you talked about sending documents out for bid. I mean, is that, and I'm not even clear whose role it is. Is it you, Sue, or is it?
Actually,
Do we need some kind of a building committee?
Actually, TBA is handling that process. And currently, they are writing up bid specs that they hope to be able to present to us early December to ultimately go out to bid for February to early March. So they should, go ahead.
Who oversees what they present, I guess, is one of Mary's.
They're going to give us their specs.
Who's us?
So yes, we would set up an internal building committee.
Made up of CPS
Yes.
staff.
CPS staff and probably town people who have been involved in other
So
projects.
would that in effect be a building committee or a construction committee?
I'm not sure what,
You're the town expert.
after speaking with Tim God didn't think we needed a town building.
Well, we're not, we should clarify, I think, Sarah, you can help me. There's no request for town or school funding.
There's no request, no, the CEF will fund.
So generally, and I may go out on a limb, maybe Cynthia, you can help me. We put in these oversight committees because they're sort of stewards of public funds, right? Like a building committee.
It's a public building.
Well, it is a public building, but also use of public funds requires some oversight. So what is it, where's the intersection of private money into public?
Your facility is also your fund, your facility is your, right,
We-
your building committee is also protecting your facility.
We have a town asset that we're
Right.
charged with
Taken care of.
taking care of, and this.
But if we
affects
we are the body that sort of has that responsibility, and if we decide that this is an improvement to said town asset,
My belief and understanding is we can delegate this oversight authority to any body we
Great.
choose or take it on ourselves.
okay, does that make sense to you, Cynthia?
So Justin Humphries from TBA would act as the clerk of the works, so to speak, and he will run the weekly update meetings where these two very generous ladies would probably be present, the members of the committee that Jim appoints or works with you to create.
She's like, well, let's separate, Susan. I think what I'm hearing is, if we acknowledge that we approve it and we then delegate or designate, I'm not sure the right verb, the school to decide who should oversee it, whether that's staff or CEF or us or town people, it doesn't matter, whatever assembly of people,
Right.
then we've kind of done our job.
Yes.
We don't have to get into whether Sarah's going to put a hard hat on and go
No.
out there. Right, I mean, that's not really our job. Once we've done that,
Right.
we just do oversight, right? So I'm okay with that. Does that make sense to you?
Are the contractors and project managers and architects and so on paid directly from CEF? Or does that money flow through the town and school to those?
It would, from my understanding, it would flow from the school. The CEF would give funding to the school, and then
Okay.
the school would
So
then
make sure
pay.
the
So
money-
that may be an answer
That's
to your...
more complicated.
that- Yeah, that may be an answer
Probably
to your
not as
question,
good an
David,
answer.
about public oversight of
Okay, all right.
of funds, even though it's funds allocated to a specific
Yeah,
purpose.
okay.
We understood it that was the channel that we were supposed to.
We
use,
probably
but-
need-
I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just trying to,
Another
what's
way.
All right,
happening.
we'll figure out a way. I think
Okay.
that's a Harrington job, probably.
We really feel passionate about helping, or well, funding this project, but we
Yeah.
don't feel comfortable as a group managing it, overseeing it. We don't think
Okay.
that that's our role.
So there'll be a quote, but quotes can
Yes.
be exceeded, I guess.
Yeah.
You're gonna donate X amount of money, and
Yeah.
the liability,
There's a-
what happens to
There's
the...
a contingency already in the feasibility study proposal. You know, once they come back, once TBA comes back and does like a real design process
Yeah,
with the end users,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
and any other parties that need to be involved in that, then they'll have the real budget, and always built into that is a contingency.
right.
And we feel comfortable with the proposed budget
Yeah.
so far, and we feel even comfortable going a little bit above that.
Okay.
We think that's something that we can meet.
We have a buffer above,
Yeah, okay.
above that. And we feel that with a mix of planned fundraising events,
Okay.
existing commitments, and previously raised funds,
We get it.
we feel comfortable moving
Right,
forward.
but, I mean, back to the financial oversight, are you then meeting out the money, or are you granting all the money you think you need to Susan, and somebody has to manage that money, and it's not clear.
The way we had discussed doing it would be that as a bill comes in, we advance the funds to the school.
I see, okay, so you are effectively
And
financial oversight.
TBA said that that's, but they
Okay, all
don't
right.
expect,
That's okay.
that we've talked with them.
Do we have a precedent for this in town?
Yes, with CEF, when
Engineering.
they've been kind enough to do another project when the bill comes in.
So you've done a project like this, where it's been privately
Well, the
funded?
engineering room,
Okay.
The library.
with the library
Okay,
project.
all right, good.
Correct.
Sorry.
So Dave, we need to just make sure we accept the donations, or one or more, right, as they come in.
Yeah,
Right, so-
we'll word it some way like that. Right.
Yeah.
To accept the donation in whatever form, right? I think that's right. Go ahead, Mary, you
I have-
more questions?
So I have two more questions. I think one is the darn elevator, right? I mean, where are we with long-term caps? We've been talking about that elevator since I was chair of the school committee, which was some time ago. And I think the feeling was, when it breaks, we'll have to find money in long-term caps to repair it,
Mary-
or to replace it, right? Because parts are no longer available, et cetera. I don't imagine this is going to see a lot more use because of the music room, but it will see some. Where are we with that?
So,
Well,
Mary-
you said it right, I think. Go ahead.
Maybe I could respond. So for a number of years, we put in capital requests to the town for elevator replacement, citing the fact that the elevator was old, the elevator repair company said parts were no longer available, and that we may soon be faced with a situation where it breaks and parts are not available to fix it. Having approached FinCom from long-term caps perspective on that, their answer was, well, ask for the money when it breaks.
Right.
And
It goes back to my era.
and the response to that is, well, when it breaks, we may not have time to go through a whole planning cycle and budgeting cycle. We need it fixed quickly. So then I brought the matter up with the Board of Selectmen. And now the board is always changing, but at least the board at the time gave an understanding that as opposed to allocate the funds at that time, a couple of years ago, to the elevator, they would expect that over the coming years, there might be an emergency request for elevator, and they would put that on in their planning horizon. They would think about that. and
So Josh,
contemplate.
you and I are witnesses to those conversations, because that's been the theme, I agree, for the last several years.
Yes, and I've been part of that conversation where Board of Selectmen have committed that to me. I recognize that the board is constantly changing, and many of the people who
Right.
committed that are not even there anymore. It perhaps behooves us to renew that commitment periodically with the current board.
The elevator?
It's the only elevator that goes down to We have 3 elevators, but they service different parts of the building.
Right, so in other words, we'd be sort of out of ADA compliance if it
Yeah,
gets to that
yeah.
point.
Dave, can you recognize Scott?
Yes, Mr. Triolo.
Scott Field, Hart Farm Road. It's also been discussed in the past in the finance committee that if the elevator were to break, we could do a reserve fund transfer for that. And
Right.
That's been discussed.
So that would speed up the fixing and replacement, the money for the fixing or replacement. But I think to Josh's point, that, well, if you don't proactively replace it, you might have a lag of time by the time a new elevator company can put in an elevator. I have no idea, but that's a risk we bear, right?
That is a risk we bear indeed.
Did we devolve from the original topic?
No, because it's related, but I
Well,
think,
it brings up another issue, though, that I'd like to,
is it related to the mistake room?
well, yes,
Okay.
it's related to the mistake room. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that you're undertaking this project and going to be raising the money for it, and I appreciate all the work and all the money people give for it. It will make a big difference to the music education in the district. And as part of that, it will increase the footprint of the school between 1% and 2%. Accordingly, the overall maintenance costs long-term for the facility will be expected to go up. If the CF would endeavor to endow maintenance funds for this room, that would be an added bonus and not a mistake. So if you can talk to the architects about that and keep that in mind as you talk to them in terms of what should be expected for ongoing maintenance. Otherwise, this wonderful gift you've given to the town will have burdened the taxpayers with maintaining it. And I want it to be all positive from their perspective.
And we did sort of think too that and we understand the ongoing maintenance costs of the room. It is an added space, but we also can see that there's going to be a little bit less of a burden on the auditorium, both on the wooden floor, say, on the stage, and all the wear and tear on the carpeting in the back, where Kevin is constantly going back and forth. And so I'm not saying it's an exact trade-off, but there will be less of a burden from the auditorium being less used by all those children.
And we
I agree.
we began preliminary conversations with TVA about that, but we'll have to understand what materials are used and what kind of lifespan there is for different things, but.
And that speaks
yes.
also to Mary's question about, well, is the elevator going to get more use and is it going to break sooner? And which elevator are we talking about anyways? But, because,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to put that out there.
Then we have cost estimates.
Mary?
on what that would be, so.
You still have the floor if you have any more questions.
Last call, last one, I promise. It was brought up to me by a parent this morning about this potentially, right, changes or could change morning drop-off for band students who might be carrying a big instrument and wanted, this morning or today they can drop it off in the auditorium there and run off to classes. Now they're a little bit further away. I think that door's locked in the morning, right? So just, I guess it's for you, Jim, sort of looking at traffic patterns for some of these students.
Yeah, we'd have to look at that and see what, I think that would be a small problem, right? I mean, right now we have,
Yeah.
right now we have students who drop off their instruments all over the school and leave them there, and we have to gather them up each day. So I think it's something we could work out. And it would probably make sense if we worked it out in a more efficient fashion for everybody, regardless of where the band practices.
Maybe they could leave them in the lobby down by the gym there and then make an obstacle course? What about
It's a
it?
possibility. We'll see how Margaret feels about that.
But that's something that could be brought up in the design meetings with TVA and sort of getting that established.
Work with
from the
them, work with
get-go.
Kevin, work
Yeah.
And understand how all the.
how the flow will work, yeah.
I kind of like the biathlon, run the course and then have a concert with the instrument. Okay, Josh?
I've checked my questions off. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate it.
Just want to thank you again. The other comment I have is, at least personally, I support the selling of naming rights, but I would encourage you to do it in keeping with personal names as opposed to company names, as we discussed in the...
That reminds me, thank you for bringing that up. Nancy, we did have a naming rights policy discussion, right? We have a policy?
Yes,
on
we
naming
do.
rights?
You have policy,
Can
would
you
you like
pull
to see
that?
it?
Do you have it?
I do.
Sarah's
a few years
prepared.
ago.
Carlisle School Committee has the authority to name newly constructed schools as well as rename existing facilities, including rooms or areas within existing school buildings, etc. Further, school committee or its designee must approve. Design, wording, and placement for plaque signs, memorials, okay. Facilities may be named after notable persons, entities. You're asking not to have an entity.
Well, the discussion came up at the time about what we wanted to have, and we said,
But-
we reserved the judgment, so we left it broad.
Right. So your request, I mean, you wouldn't want like XYZ Co. You'd say.
Yeah, this is not the Pepsi.
But what about the CEF if it's named?
We can consider it.
Okay, so it looks like that's fine. And
This was
then,
more namings for specific families.
Understood.
okay, thank you.
So, can I?
Yes, go ahead.
So to clarify the process, say this, is approved, and is ready to get going, the next step would be TBA, the firm, is putting together the template for the RFP. And are they an architectural firm? What is
Yes.
their?
They're in
okay.
Concord.
And so then the town would issue the RFP, right, and receive?
Actually, TBA is issuing the RFP once we approve it. We're going to go over.
It's contractors, or contractors that would work for it as well.
Right.
Is that consistent, because this is funded by CEF but through us, does it have to comply with municipal procurement
It's going to
policy?
comply with Chapter 149,
Is that the one that covers building process?
I believe so.
Okay. It's a different procurement process for buildings than it is for
Right,
renovations than it is for supplies.
right.
Yeah, they said it's like the DCAM Tier 2 renovation.
Okay,
Yeah,
they know what they're doing.
I think so. They sounded like.
I've met with them many times.
Okay, and then once the proposals are received, then the town will be reviewing them and making a selection. And
The town or TBA?
What's
Or the
TBA's role
committee.
in that?
The internal committee.
Or there'll be a committee formed?
The-
So we were going to have an internal committee that would be overseeing it. So I guess that committee would look at it.
Who's the GC? Is TBA the general contractor?
No, they would hire.
No, that would
So
be
that's
Never hire.
the goal, is to
That's what
hire
they're
the general
doing.
contractors to get their own subs.
All right, so really their evaluation is at the GC level, and that's as far as I know. And who vetted TBA? I know they're good, but what was the process by which they were selected? That was.
TBA, back when we did the first search,
Mhm.
we had several architects submit bids.
Okay, so
and-
we selected.
Yeah, we did,
This is part of the mistake room or for other?
the mistake room.
Okay.
They were currently doing something either for the town or for Concord. I forget.
They did the facility study for town hall, police, fire, DPW, and we're in the process of negotiating having them do one for library.
Okay.
Did they do this? Concept?
Yes, they did, yeah. And that's so they were chosen from a few
From the school, with the
candidates
school.
to do the feasibility study. And
Okay.
Mary, you had something to say?
Yeah, sorry, I thought of one more question as Melinda was talking. It's like, and I don't know if Kevin is still there, but would
Yeah.
we anticipate that anybody would, third parties would want to rent this space the way they rent other spaces in the school?
I mean, we run into, it'd certainly be an option, because we have discussed some recording capacities. But certainly, it could be used as a rehearsal space. It's, you run into maintenance concerns of what that looks like. And ultimately, one of the biggest concerns that I have in the usage of the stage is even when it's my home, when it gets used and then reset, the 7th grade play in particular, it gets set
Right.
differently each and every time I come in. So it's kind of, I would have that concern if it got rented out, how policies would be written up with, here's how it's used, here's the expectation as to what it's set up like after, before and after, so, I mean, sure.
No, just the instruments being there too.
Yeah.
So, okay. No, I was just curious if there had been any thought have been given to that.
Yeah, there is some, the instruments being stored in there, blocking capacity, so that would be a concern as far as keeping them secure. That's certainly working around, because the instrument storage cabinets are feasibly to do that.
Yep.
Is there been any thought to consideration, part of it, putting security camera systems as part of securing the instruments.
It's not a bad idea.
No, I hadn't thought about that. The one option for the storage, actually, they do sell instrument storage case with locking things.
The kids need to get in and out of it,
They do
and
need
you
to get
imagine
in
a
and
kid
out of it.
goes,
And
my
we don't
instrument's
know-
gone.
I don't know if we, as a school, want to have cages for our things aesthetically. No, but that could, yeah, I would think that putting a little like Arlo camera or something there could be.
I think camera's a bigger conversation, something we can
But,
talk about in a
Instead of
larger
always
context.
everywhere, but
I know, but as soon as you bring cameras into your building for one purpose, then
Okay.
you're bringing cameras into your building, and that's
I
a
agree,
bigger
I agree with
conversation.
Jim. Jim, do you have other comments about the project?
No, I'm just appreciative of the CF and all the work they've done to make this potentially possible, and hopefully we can move forward.
Okay, so-
And I apologize to Mari, because I know there is still a demand for that classroom space also for the PE department, but this is a great way.
Your
to-
request is that we vote today, right? So do we vote, Nancy, at the end? Or do we is there any reason not to vote now? Okay.
you want
Make a motion.
Okay.
to open up for public comments, given we're voting in the same session as the presentation?
Yes. Public comment, yes. Cynthia.
I have a concern that with the money being, it's not a question because you don't take questions. The concern is with the money going from CEF to the school and that's spent, if all the money isn't deposited with the school when the project begins and some flow of money ends,
Yeah,
then
that was
we're
my
gonna have
concern as
finished
well.
room.
So there has to be, that was a good question, because that's well articulated. Back to what we were talking about earlier. So you come up with a sum that you think that is quoted, plus a reserve amount, I guess, and you have it in some bank account. And bills come in through Susan, and you make a sequence of gifts to cover bills, but well, I guess the question is, when one starts a project, maybe it's a Scott question, you should look up from this one. Any project we start in the town, and we have a budget, and then things happen and it exceeds what happens. You've only reserved X, let's say it's a town meeting and a warrant article, and there's an X amount, what happens?
You're out of money.
And then
Work
what?
stops.
It hasn't happened while I've been
Really?
in the finance committee, but I mean, you can only appropriate the funds that have been voted in the town meeting in that case.
Right, so everybody has to live, so is this any different then, if we essentially?
Well, what I mean is, it sounds like they're releasing money.
Well, that's the release of it, but if we see a bank statement that says, I don't know,
They
the
could put a
250,
whole new staff on the CEF.
then it could be in an escrow account. Is that the right way to do it?
Well, the whole project is 10 weeks. It's
Right,
2
so
weeks for
this-
demolition and 8
right.
weeks for construction.
Right.
And
So
We're
it's-
talking about a tight timeline.
So we're talking a very tight
It would
timeline
be containing our.
that is ideally this summer.
Right.
It's an ideal timeline, right?
Well, I think-
How that plays out may be different in
Yeah.
the real.
So if we designate Susan as fiduciary and overseeing it, it's not much different than if you
Right.
appropriate money, right? You just have to look at your budget. So I guess I'm not concerned about it, but if there's a legal reason, we probably do need to run past town council just to make sure we understand. what we're
One
doing.
of the things that we just don't want to get stuck with
Yeah.
is, let's say, we think it's going to cost X amount of money, but it really comes in under that, and we've already given all that money, and then
Yeah.
that money becomes restricted,
The fundraising money.
Well, that's okay. We won't,
and
yeah,
we wouldn't be able to use that for anything.
No, so I understand the sequencing of the release, right? Okay. That's a good problem.
Your concern is that the money you gave us would be restricted, we couldn't give back? Your concern is that when you raise the money, there would be restricted donations that you would
It
raise?
would be restricted donations.
That would happen anyway if you had, whether it's in your bank account or out.
Yeah.
If we over-raise.
Right, so you don't want to raise
We
too
overraise
much.
them, then we have a nice little padding for,
Contingency.
The maintenance fund, the maintenance fund. Okay.
Do some awesome recording equipment in there.
fine.
Eva, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Anyone else? Kevin? No? Happy?
Yeah. I think just the prospect of not having to move chairs on
Yeah.
a daily basis.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times my prep period is moving 50 chairs from one location to another because of percussion equipment.
Great.
And the value and the time as far as, and then, with the kids moving it, like
Yeah.
that's invaluable. That's
Okay.
for lost time in some way, but it's just I'm so appreciative, and I mean, when Sia first approached me, I was floored, and it just meant so much that, I mean, to have a home. Like, I've been flexible and kind of homeless for my whole career. So it's just, it would be fabulous, so.
Great, okay.
Dave, you looking for a motion?
Sure, I am.
I move that we accept with gratitude the proposed offer from CEF to modify the mistake room into a band practice, music practice room, subject to 3 conditions. One, that town council blesses the process. A second, that we work out some oversight capability, whether it be through this committee or school administration. And lastly, that the financial issue that Cynthia raised is addressed. And subject to those 3 conditions, that we accept and go forward on this.
I'll second that.
Great. What was the third condition?
Concern that what happens if we get a bill and they run out of funds, or somehow the person who pays the funds isn't there that week, or...
Okay, so funds, okay, great. Further discussion? Roll call vote?
Gambino, aye.
Nodell, aye.
Kablotsky, aye.
Doors, aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Matt and Dennett, would you like to come up?
So tonight we're here to talk about MCAS. And so we went from MCAS to PARC. Now we have the new MCAS. This is our 2nd year. It is grades 3 through 8, all on computers. It is ELA and math. And then the legacy, the same MCAS for science in grades 5 and 8.
So Dr. Seidel and I are going to be sharing our analysis of the district's and schools' MCAS performance from the spring of 2018. We're going to hit on some of these points here. This is really just an overview. I'm going to talk about the test grade areas, subject areas, how we are interpreting the MCAS data, both for at the grade level by the test, but then also as a district, and looking at student growth percentiles, and then looking at what we're doing with the data, why it's valuable, and kind of the next steps, why teachers use it. So what I'd like to do is start off with just a little bit of a disclaimer. We are required by both federal and state law to provide MCAS or standardized testing. I'd like to start this way because sometimes the wider public has an assumption that students can opt out of a test, and we're required to provide the test to all students. We do know, though, as educators, and I see many of our teachers here tonight, our students are more than just a test score. And that on any one particular day, students could be having a meltdown, they could have had a crisis outside of school, and the test is a snapshot. It's a moment of time, really over a couple of days. You can see the subject areas we test here. And it doesn't encapsulate who they are. It doesn't really capture the whole essence of why we're here as educators. So I just wanted to put out that bit of a disclaimer.
And some of the positive places we've gone, when we first, those of us who were teaching many, many years ago when MCAS came out, we had 24 subtests. So for us to go to 2 sessions of ELA and 2 sessions of math, even PARC was 2 different times of the year. It was disruptive and it was hard. And so I think we're going in the right direction with fewer assessments. And so from before to now, I think it's a much more positive. They've moved it so it's all at one time. It's not in March and in May and June. So that also helps us because, again, there's a lot to teaching momentum and we get moving. And then with the PARC, we had 2 different times that we had to take it. Now we're at 1 time period.
So the order of the test is required by the state. First English language arts, then math, and then our engineering and science STE test. That's for students in grades 5 and 8 only. ELA and math is for all students in grades 3 through 8.
And so is that different than it used to be? Well, that one, yeah, but MCAS wasn't every grade, was it always?
3 through 8 and grade 10.
Okay, so I just seem to remember there were like off years where
That's a long time ago.
it was a long time.
And they
Yes.
did have a very
You're right.
briefly social studies test. That was maybe back in,
Ooh, that was a long time.
yeah, like 15 years ago. The format is required by law now. All students will do computer-based testing in 2019. So that's just a little bit of context. You can see the number of sessions. The window for our testing is typically in May, and the order is dated, as I said.
Right. And even though, one reason we decided to go to computer-based even last year was because we knew that's where we were heading. So we wanted to give kids more time, because we know especially in the younger grades, typing skills aren't, if they had taken it on paper, that might have given some kids a little more comfort, but now getting used to being on computer, because we knew that's where the state was going, and that's one reason we decided to opt into computers 2 years ago.
One thing I do want to point out is the ELA and math tests here, they have a different measurement scale for performance than the science test does. Do you want to?
Sure, so with the new system comes new headings. So we have not meeting expectations, partially meeting, meeting expectations, and exceeding expectations. And these are the cutoff scores in between each one. So when we get a score for ELA or for math or science, again, science is different, so ELA and math, then we look at where they fall, and then we're looking at the different questions and how the whole class, the grade level did on a question, and how individuals did. So we're looking at both levels.
And then the state also has a new system for measuring district performance, and it's these Massachusetts accountability indicators, and they have it listed for non-high schools as well as high schools. It is a mix of achievement, student growth, English language proficiency, and other indicators such as attendance. You can see our score here is rather high, it's 94%. We're meeting all of our targets. This is the official report, and in comparison to neighboring districts and other high performing districts, you can see we are here in yellow at 91%. A little bit behind this number of 94% is a criterion reference comparison. As I said, it looks at all student performance in the areas of achievement and growth, and then it also calculates and incorporated into that 94% is the lowest performing students. So they want to see how all kids are doing, but then also the bottom quartile. So that's how this number is derived. 94.
So Matt, first of all, can you define the difference between achievement and growth? And then second question is, on that last point, my recollection and what you said is that in some other, I may have it out of context, but it's kind of the spread, the gap between the highest and the lowest. They don't want this big gap to open up. It's great to have some high performers, but if these other guys are lagging,
Precisely. If we want all of our students achieving at a high level, so they set improvement targets and we're meeting them. So that's the good news, and that's, in terms of your other questions, the achievement and the growth, that really is a nice segue into our results.
Okay.
Because we disaggregated it by grade level, by growth percentile, and then the percentage of students that were in those top two categories that Dennis referenced earlier of meeting and exceeding. So if you add those two categories in, how we're doing as a whole.
But I do want to jump in about the gap, because what they do is they compare kids at each level with other kids who performed at that level the previous year.
From our system or state?
From all systems, right? So they'll take kids who had a certain score,
and how well they
and
did.
then they look at how they did the following year, and plus, I'm simplifying it, but then they come out with the growth percentile compared to kids.
Sorry, just define what growth means. Give me an example of growth.
So narrowly defined by the state is the metric that they use.
So just use say
So,
the
there are-
fourth grade or whatever.
Okay, so let's use 7th grade.
Okay.
So here's an example. In 7th grade, a student goes in and takes a test and gets
Yep.
a 500.
Yep.
That's right smack in the middle.
Yeah,
There are 70,000 seventh graders in the Commonwealth. So that's, Gillette Stadium filled up with seventh graders. Out of only that seventh graders that took that test, let's say it's in English,
yeah,
there are probably thousands that also got that exact score of a 500.
yeah,
They take those kids
Yep.
and they put them in a cohort,
yeah,
and then they track them, and then the next year,
Yep.
they compare one student's performance relative to those students that scored a 500 on the prior year. And that's how a student growth percentile is calculated.
So say the Carlisle student who got 500 in 7th gets 525 in 8th.
Mhm.
Does that mean in this rubric that, like, he's in the 50% group of the?
No,
What-
because it all depends how everyone else did in the cohort.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yep.
Well, you're right, I shouldn't have said,
Because
whatever the
co-
score is.
The whole cohort could have improved by 2 points, but one improved by 10.
Right, but what does
Right.
50% mean here? Does that mean we're in the middle
That's
of?
percentile, not percent.
Across the entire state. So
We're
this.
we're in the
these are
middle
our-
of the growth. We're not,
Yes.
Yep.
it's not an exceptional score, it's an okay score, right?
That is, think of it like the middle.
Right, but like the 5th grade, the
Median
42 means more in the cohort did better than the ones here.
That's right.
Improved.
Yes.
So there's work to be done in
Yes.
that one. Okay.
Yep. Even despite the fact that we have a 94% in the aggregate, I agree with that statement. And I want to point out that we don't do in 3rd grade because that's the first year, so there's something to grow, there's not a starting point.
Let me ask you a question a few slides back. Is your assertion that Chapter 69, Part 1I, requires students to take the exam?
We are required to offer the exam. We can't,
And you're required to maintain records of individual students? But you're not required to, but the students are not required to take the exams?
I think we are compelled to
Yes.
have these students take the exam.
I disagree. From where in
In the
the chapter
compulsion.
do you
I'm not quoting.
discern that?
I would want to consult an attorney before
So-
probably commenting on that
So
question.
before saying that the students are compelled to take the exam, I suggest doing that because
We are compelled.
we're compelled to offer it.
I think he's right.
The term offer, I don't know if I've ever.
And
seen
to track
that.
the results.
Parents are permitted to opt out of the test, right? Wasn't that the whole issue from before?
So, and
I'm not sure we want.
there's not a permission to opt out of the test. The state has not provided that.
The state, nor does the state require the students to take it.
I think, Jim, we should
We can table that.
table that and talk to council. I don't think, we're running a little behind, and that's a long,
So this is our
complicated discussion.
English results from 2018 from the spring. And then compare that with math, or just note math. You want to?
Well, I just want to talk about 1 point for ELA, particularly our 4th grade in writing. Our scores we got in our open response, several high scores that we have not gotten in past years. One, there was a focus in 4th grade this year around writing, and we also looked at children who previously did not perform as high the year before and made that a focus as well. So they did very well. So we'll be looking over the years if this was just 1 year or is it going to carry over next several years, but they did an excellent job. And as far as 3rd grade too, you need to remember this is the first test that many of the kids are taking. They're not used to multiple choice tests. They're not used to doing things on the computer. And so 3rd grade, this cohort did very well with 86. That's high for us overall from year to year. Again, it's hard to compare because we had the park and this is new. So we can't go back and say, oh, this is park and this is the previous. So we've only had this for 2 years.
Question on those,
Yes.
on those results, not about law. Comparing to other districts, the results look good, but if I step back and say 1 out of 5 kids don't even meet expectations, what is your take on that statement?
So again, I guess I look at 3rd grade. So we looked at some of our students who, I guess we were a little surprised at how they performed. And part of it could be that they're not used to taking a test. They had test anxiety, so we're not looking,
This
because
is true in 6th, 7th, and 8th. I mean, 7th and 8th were below the average of 79%.
Mhm.
So it isn't just,
No, I was just looking, I'm sorry, I was just talking about 3 and 4.
Okay, 3 and 4 actually did better than many of the other grades.
It's obvious that Dennett does a better job than Matt.
No.
But I think,
Not just a ride.
so, but it does lead to a question, which students with needs who are in IEPs or accommodations, how does that how does that expectation, how is that set? Because the expectation for that child might be very different.
This is the aggregate percentage of kids in all by grade.
Right.
So they are part,
Right.
and part of that.
But no, I guess maybe I'm not asking it right.
Okay.
If a student with a certain need, really, a 470 would be a great score for that student, but
So
yet
then-
it's not on the
So yeah, you're
scale.
looking-
Right, but then you look at their growth.
And you look at their growth.
Okay,
So,
but
and that's-
on the raw achievement, you don't get a break, is what you're saying.
Correct,
Okay,
right.
all right.
You would not get a break on that.
And we're
Right.
speaking in generalities.
Correct.
We're talking about, think about the sample size here, 70, 80 kids per grade
Right.
level.
Right.
So what I do, and we do this, is we meet with our teachers, and I break it down by the student, by the standard, and in fact, this binder,
Right,
I had to go get it from a teacher because they were using it.
yeah.
So, we meet with teachers regularly and we share the results. And again, I want to harken back to what I started with is, this is a test that is really 4 days. So
Right.
it's a snapshot, it's a moment in time. Do you want to continue with English?
Yep, nope.
No, but just to add to your comment, Matt, I think what I'm hearing, which to me is the right answer, is it is an absolute score, and therefore, like everything in this world that's quantified, it gets compared and analyzed, and we're a competitive town, and so we look at how we do against Lexington and blah, blah, blah. But at the core, what I'm hearing is whether you want it, whether in an ideal world you even would take the test or not is irrelevant, because you have to. But at least you take the data that it generates, and you use it as a teaching tool, let's say, for your own assessment of
Right, and we talked
how
to
the child
teachers,
is.
and I was just talking to a teacher the other day who, 2 of the kids, the teacher said, they're my top performers.
Yeah.
They just didn't do well on this particular moment. So when we look at data over time for this child, okay, then let's see, we're not going to put an intervention in because of MCAS.
No, it's not an
Right, we're gonna-
intervention, I think, right.
We're going to look at how they're doing in the classroom as
Right.
well as this. Right.
So then how do you use that data, for example, on that slide with the English, how do you use that data for the district? When you look at that slide,
So I look at it programmatically because the test is correlated with standards. So there's various standards in English and in math and science. And we look at how our students do as a grade by each standard, and I compare it with the state average. And we see, we're beating state, and you can see trends. And in general, we'll speak to some of the trends, specifically in writing. And I noticed a pattern in inferencing that transcended both English and math.
In what?
Inferencing, the standard and skill. I wanted to jump back to this because this continuum here is what parents get. You probably, if you have children, you've seen this, it was mailed out. And on it will be a number, and then it'll give you a bar, because there's like a standard error there. Assuming the child would take the test again, this would be the range. And when we look at student performance, we noticed there were a good group of kids here that were in the high 490s, 495. So right on the edge. So the standard error is there.
But if they all took them again, the average would probably be in the same place, because as many would do better as would do worse.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But we also want to see where then they go next year and the year after.
That's the trend.
Because
Yeah.
Right.
beforehand, we saw a steady incline up as they move through the middle school. So we'll see if that continues.
So that's math and English. And then for science, because it has been MCAS, and I know, I apologize, the scale is, the slide is pretty small and hard to see. You can look back, I believe, 4 or 5 years there, and they have a different measurement score. Instead of proficient, it's advanced proficient, it needs improvement in learning. So that is the prior MCAS. Some people refer to it as the legacy MCAS.
You made mention a few minutes ago of, I believe it was in grade 4, a language arts effort, an initiative, and that accounted
Yes.
for some good scores.
We'll see. Yeah.
Do Do you see any correlation between curriculum efforts and scores on a grade level basis in individual areas? Or are these totally uncorrelated?
I think it depends. I think sometimes, I mean, we are doing a lot with knowledge and information that the MCAS doesn't test, right? So, but when we talk about language or we talk about problem solving, there's some here, but there's so many things we do that isn't here. So I think what we look at is, do we see a couple years in a row where, oh, we are seeing kind of maybe for us, compared to us, a weakness within the system. Like we'll look at, you know, was geometry lower than the other sections for a couple years? And this year, no. And last year, it's kind of spread here or there depending on the individual. So we didn't have something to say, oh, well, let's look at our curriculum because maybe we're not doing enough here. Where years ago, we did some work around curriculum. So I would say at times yes, and at times no.
Okay, and the N is so small that there's such variability year to year that you have to wait a few years
You have to be
figure out.
careful with this.
You really do. Like we wanted to give you longevity, but we can't because this is only the second year with this particular assessment.
Right, they keep changing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to.
So I can transition to the
Yeah,
final
sure.
slide here, just kind of what we've noticed and where we're going with this. So we use the data, we look at it, we take it for what it's worth. As I said, we get it usually late summer. We get it raw, we disaggregate it by gender, by subgroup, by grade level, by test type. We look at growth and achievement, we look for patterns. We've identified, we look at the lower performing students, and the bottom 25, the quartile is what the state is recommending we look at. And we think about the child, who the child is. I mean, you have the institutional knowledge here in terms of what transpired when they're taking the test. And then it speaks to what we can do differently. And a couple of notes that we found is, and this is consistent not only for Carlisle students, but across the state, the hardest questions and the questions that the students struggled the most on involved written expression. So if it was the old MCAS, it would be like the open response. That was in 7th grade. But the written response questions were really hard, 3 through 8, across the entire
This
state.
is writing an essay or answer. There's no multiple choice. It's writing.
Exactly.
Well, you're saying that the average student did below average in those areas?
No, I'm saying that was the hardest question on the MCAS, and it also had a higher percentage of points associated with it. So it was a hard question. This is difficult for kids. So it's just an area to grow. And also one thing I noticed is both in math as well as in English language arts is the standard of inferencing is also challenging for middle school students.
What is inferencing?
Inferencing is looking at, it could be from literature, looking at a couple of passages and then inferring what the author's tone or meaning is. And then the skill of inferencing was there in math as well.
Yeah.
And that's something developmentally, actually you'll see it on a bulletin board out there. I noticed 3rd graders are working on inferencing right down the hallway.
And then, so we've been trying to give more support in grades 3 through 8 for Tier 2. Our population is changing and we're having more kids that are struggling. Not that they're Tier 3, which would be on IEPs, but just kids who need a little more. So we're continuing to look at where did they do here, as well as how are they doing in the classroom. So teachers are giving a lot of data. We have Leslie Yanka and Kathy Macklis who are really helping with how we are identifying kids and then giving small group instruction.
Question on that. You say the number of getting Tier 2 support has gone up. Is that because we're doing a better job of identifying who needs Tier 2 support? Because the population overall has an increase in number? Or because, as Dave might have said, we have adverse selection and end up with more Tier 2 through some other mechanism?
I think because we have a curriculum that moves quickly and we have high expectations, that we have kids who, with that increased need, have needs. And in my 7 years here, I'm seeing that we have more kids coming in that don't have the skills that we might have had in higher numbers. So we have, in my opinion, yes, we have more kids that need help with skills than we did when I first arrived.
But again, going back to the source of, is it more the mix of children or the curriculum got more aggressive?
I think the assessment is hard.
So are you, well, I guess that's a different question, which is, I kind of said it, but I didn't really ask you, I just stated it, so maybe I was wrong. Is this a useful assessment tool, or are there really more useful things that you do?
Oh yes, there's much more useful things.
Okay. So, no, I mean, that's, so we have to take it anyway. So it is a piece of data, but.
We try to extract some meaning from it.
Right, but you don't, given our small district size and the attention everybody, many of the people in this room pay on children.
Correct.
If you ignored this data, if you just said, okay, this scored, and completely ignored it, would you have less of a knowledge base? I mean, we all tend to want to see data and figure it out, but is it possible that really it's a waste of time to even
Our
worry about
teachers
it?
take a lot of data. Our
Right.
teachers really look at kids on a daily basis, short-term, long-term,
Right.
and we talk about it at grade levels.
I know you do,
And,
yeah.
right, so maybe some districts that don't do that, this
No,
is
no,
more
I got that.
helpful.
I'm saying, because we're all data-driven people and you throw a piece of data at us, we're like, let me analyze the data, but maybe it's a waste of time. Maybe you just say, you know what, the state says we have to take the test. Great, we took the test. We want to make sure people learn how to take tests, or maybe you don't, but okay. But you know what, we're not gonna base any decisions about tier 2 support or skill development on this test, because that's not the way we teach. I mean, that's just the.
Right, we just use it as a data point to what the teachers are already doing.
If I understood what you're saying,
Oh.
other districts pay a lot of attention to this because they don't have as much other data. We have a lot of other data, we take this as a point, but we take it in a broader context of a lot of other
There
data.
are some
we have.
districts that take as much data as we do, as well as short-term, long-term, and there are districts that might struggle with that. That's a strength for a lot of what we do.
Are we weighing this appropriately, you feel, as compares to the other data we have available?
Oh, yes. Yes. We look at it, we talk about it, we move on.
Mary, you have the presentation, and do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. I'm listening.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
very helpful. I learned something. Very good, thanks. Okay. All right. Last time we heard from Mike Gilbert, and he presented the Policy 21 program, which is a service to help us with our updating, well, in part, it's policy manual development for those schools who don't maybe do as good a job as I think we do. And in part, it's for the ongoing rejuvenation of those policies as we ourselves do. And companion to that, he offered, as I recall, he offered sort of three things. There was this body of work, and they would help us hammer out policies and stuff. And then the second piece was they would make sure, I don't know if it's in sequence, but they'd make sure it's all online and that it's all annotated or cross-referenced so that if you're online and you were clicking on it or something, the appropriate Mass General Law would come up or whatever, you know, I mean, all these kind of bells and whistles. So, okay, so it's a proposal. We learned about it last time, and I don't think we're at a point to make a decision, but before we forget all about it, and that now that Mike's not here, I thought it'd be useful to just spend a few minutes on feedback about that and whether any piece of it is applicable to us. Mr. Kowalski.
Thank you, Mr. Riddell. So regarding the first piece of helping us work through our policies and make sure they're all appropriate, this is a service we already pay for. And as you said, we can't dump 200 policies on their desk and expect them to chew on them all at once right now. But that's not how we work on policies anyways. So we still have the service available. We're already paying for it. This is just paying extra to do it in a way that we don't do it in. That offers no value compared to the way we're doing it. So that part of it I see as a waste.
Okay.
Then you look at the online access of these policies. If you look at what it costs to host and serve a few hundred documents,
Yeah.
it's nowhere near the fee that they propose to charge, and they pretty much acknowledge that.
They use a third party, to be fair.
Yeah, they use
I
a
think
third party.
use a-
They collect some money for passing it through them, and the third party makes plenty of money on this too. This is a capability we should more than have sufficient abundance in the district and in the town.
Yep.
So I don't think we should give it any further consideration.
Okay? Don't sugarcoat it. Tell us what you really think. Okay, Mary?
Maybe I'll sugarcoat it, but I feel the same way as Josh. I will say, though, that I chaired a policy subcommittee at the region, and we sit down with a rep from MASC about once a month, maybe every 6 weeks, and go through 8, 10, 12 policies that the administration has brought forth. We sit there with somebody from MASC that gives us guidance, and then we bring them to the full school committee. It's a different structure to review them. It sort of takes the burden off the full committee and puts more of it on a subcommittee. It works fairly well, but I tend to believe that asking the one-off questions the way we do today is probably more productive for us.
I'm sorry, asking the which questions?
Well, so if we're reviewing policies as a committee the way we do today,
Yeah.
and then we have a one-off question, we go and ask them, right? And they're okay with
But
that.
that rep willingly comes in once a month to help you with policies?
Yeah,
Wow.
we have a,
Oh, they're on the service. Oh, okay. I was saying, why don't we do that?
We can do send them questions
No,
when
I
we
know.
have them anyway.
Right.
They have
Okay.
a lot of,
I see.
Mary, is that for both the regional and Concord schools, the policy subcommittee?
yeah, because it's one it's one policy manual for both
We
districts.
have a lot of policies,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
How many policies do we have, just out of curiosity?
About 73, I think.
okay, so we are in a,
How
we
many
try
do you
to,
think?
I think it's about 73.
so a 3-year cycle is, where's the math guys? Leslie? 73 divided by?
I'm on the clock right now.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's like 25 a year. I
Yeah,
guess, right?
we've got 10, 11 meetings at a time.
Yeah,
So
so
we
we
do
try to
three
do a
policies,
couple.
three
So we
policies.
kind of muddle
We get
on
through them
with
every 3 years.
Right.
It's not a,
And their templates are all available online.
yeah.
I should have called out Brad. Or, Christine, we got lots of math people here. Oh, my gosh.
Having it hosted is well, not necessarily by MASC, but like you were saying, Josh, if we had a facility that would allow us to host these PDFs and search them in a better way, that would be nice, but not worth whatever that number was, 3,500?
Right.
Yeah, I have a few
Yeah.
thoughts on that, but I don't have to voice them in committee.
Yeah.
Christine has been working with Nick, right? On,
Trying to make it more accessible.
Yeah,
Trying to make
no
the
problem.
policies
So-
easier to
and
search.
Christine's not here today.
It's still a work in progress right now.
Let's get Melinda's, any comments?
Yeah, I think it's very
They took some steps that
reasonable
became
to
a
do
little
it,
challenging.
to keep it
Yeah,
in-house and
okay.
keep doing it
Okay,
in-house.
Josh, you
For
want-
all the reasons that were already mentioned.
So I might suggest, when I'm off the committee, it is nice to have somebody from Carlisle on that subcommittee
Yeah.
at the region, because then we can kind of piggyback off of some of those discussions, that advice.
That's a good point.
What are you saying, that if you learn something in Concord that you think is applicable, you'll bring it forward?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Okay, good.
Right, so, and vice versa, so it is nice to have that.
Okay. So maybe as a
You know,
practice, I
get the
mean,
expertise.
Right.
Go ahead, Dave.
well, you came up with a point that, one of the things we've been doing lately, and we're gonna do it tonight, in fact, is anytime we have a policy review now, we pull up the MASC policy, and we look at the two of them. In fact, I last night compared the two bullying policies, and I thought that was a pretty interesting comparison in what is in one and versus what is in another. So we're already doing that benchmarking with that. You're offering maybe another benchmark, which is to pull up the region's policy that's similar when we go through it. It would be one way, I guess. Do you think that would be useful?
Yeah, not in every case.
Okay.
I It's hard to say that. Sometimes pulling up the MASC policy is not useful because they're written for much larger districts and that kind of thing. They're nice reference points. It wouldn't hurt, but it might just be cumbersome.
Well, yeah, I want to push back on that comment. I think it's always useful to look at the MASC policy. It's not always applicable.
Sure.
We may discard it as sometimes as too broad in some cases or too, not applicable.
Yeah.
It's useful to compare. Okay, so I think that's a good discussion. I think we can put it to rest. They're not asking. It's just a good point of reference, so thank you. All right, Ms. Gambino, is that your topic?
Okay.
Topics of interest, right?
Yeah, and I made just some notes for this discussion. Mary,
I have one.
do you have them, the notes that I sent today?
You should
Yeah, I got them late, but I do have it in front of me.
Well, so basically, at the last school committee meeting, we were talking a little bit about how, strategies for just streamlining or improving communication of relevant topics from the region to the Carlisle School Committee. This Carlisle School Committee, is sort of not on the same meeting schedule. So the region is meeting more often, has many subcommittees, and there's a lot going on there. And the Carlisle School Committee is meeting once a month. So if there are things that are happening in the region that would have an impact or are relevant for us to know about, just ways that we could, facilitate that information getting over here. So, last meeting, I said that I would start a list of some of the topics I thought that would fall into that category. Obviously, any warrant articles that would impact Carlisle, any other budget items with a significant impact to the budget. Some other ideas I had were, things that might affect the transition from grade 8 to 9, topics related to or affecting the regional agreement. If there are any, personnel changes in the administration at the regional school. So those kind of things. I just started a list. I don't know if people have ideas, comments, things they might want to add to that. I mean,
It's a good list. I think what we would really need is to figure out a mechanism then.
That's the next thing. What are the relevant things and what's the mechanism for communicating?
Christine and I, as reps to the region, share what we get. So the region, we met last night, and I'm prepared to share that, relevant information later. And then for the last joint school committee for the region, I published out an email to this committee. What was relevant to the Carlisle School Committee. Yeah. I feel like we're making a mountain out of a molehill here, because I think Christine and I are the best, have the best context or the most context to understand what's relevant to the Carlisle School Committee.
Correct.
And I think some of these things on this list are not discussed at the school committee, and others are not relevant to the Carlisle School Committee. So, and I don't want to be argumentative. I think they're interesting to the Carlisle School Committee from the perspective of a parent or a resident, a taxpayer in Carlisle, but aren't necessarily relevant to the Carlisle School Committee.
Right, and as I mentioned, it was really the narrow topics of focus that I just mentioned, and then, as my thought process got rolling, I realized that there were other potential topics of interest to the school and to the administration at Carlisle School that could be easily facilitated between the two districts just through gaining access to some of the regular communications that come out of the regional school. And so that's what that was sort of the second, lower tier to this discussion. And I agree with you. This isn't a big deal. Since I joined the school committee, I think there hasn't been a mechanism in place to get that information as quickly, because there have been some absences on at the school committee meetings from Carlisle that have left bigger gaps. So I think when you sent that email just summarizing 2 bullet points of relevant topics from that public meeting. It was very helpful. And that kind of thing is just what I'm thinking.
Yep. And that's not, I mean, and I agree, it's because of the timing, you know, I thought, well, I'll just shoot off an email, and it also helps me because I forget sometimes what goes on between meetings. But I think you would be a little surprised maybe at how little is relevant to the Carlisle School Committee that goes on at the region.
You know, and
now, having said that, like, it's right, we're talking about budgets now, and you know, the special town meeting was a special issue, right? A very exceptional issue that we had.
And
but I think
that's where the timing, yeah, and that's the part where the timing probably impacted, you know, how everything, you know, panned out, because.
Well, I don't,
yeah, but that's not really relevant to the Carlisle School Committee either.
Right.
Well, I mean, the warrant, that the budget impact was at that time. Anyway, that is exactly what I'm talking about. There are probably not many big issues, but when they do come up, we just need to have a process for, you know, staying on top of it.
So, yeah, I talked to Christine a little bit last night, and I think, you know, are you guys in agreement that if we zip off an email, either Christine or myself zips off an email the next day after a regional meeting, that's enough? Or
yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking.
And should that be a quick email? Like, should we do it if nothing in there is time sensitive?
I would say use your judgment. I mean, I think, go ahead, Josh, you make
a few things. First of all, I agree with you, Mary, that you and Christine are our representatives on that committee, and as such, we entrust you, we chose you to be our representatives. And so that is, that's the right way to go about it. What I would add to Melinda's list, though, is that I'm not sure who should be looking at whom, but in any event, there's another committee there. Can we learn anything by looking at how they go about their process? They go about their business. The region committee.
Okay.
Can we learn anything about how they go about their process? Not the specifics of what's going on in the region, but about how the regional school committee operates that could be of use to us in either this might be something we adopt, or be wary because there's a pitfall they just fell into. Let's not go there. So are there things that we can learn from a process standpoint, aside from what's going on at the region, that helps us operate?
But it sounds like
committee?
like just the last topic. I mean, Mary described the process for the policies.
Exactly.
We said, does that fit us? Well, maybe not. Okay.
I'm not saying we don't do it, but if we're going to enumerate the things we're interested in, I would include.
Okay.
I would include that.
Okay.
No, I think that's a good point, Josh. I'm not sure how many people are in the room, and if Cynthia Soren's there, I don't want to be quoted, but
she's here.
In terms of process, I'm not sure how much we'll learn, but you know, you raise a good point. You raise a good point. The policy subcommittee is a good example.
Yeah, I would like to add that there are various layers of communication that do go on, right? So warrant and budget, the two towns coordinate, not always well, but they do coordinate. And in fact, Tim Goddard, the town administrator, has reached out once again to Concord to try to resuscitate the chairs meeting, which is a getting together of chairs to talk about stuff, right? It hasn't happened yet, but there's some effort to do that. On another layer, I know, Jim, you talk frequently to the superintendent, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that layer seems to be going well. And I think I have now an 8th grader, so I'll experience it for the first time, but my understanding is that that process has improved quite a bit. You just went through it, right? How did you find it?
Yeah, I think,
transition,
for us, it was good. We didn't have any special, situations or circumstances. So it was a smooth transition. I know that there was a lot of work done, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, Bill Fink did a
between
lot
the
in his
administration
place,
and to streamline that
Right.
and improve that, so.
Right, so there.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, that Bill Fink, like you said, they've pushed that, but we also had Kristen Herbert, who knew Carrie Wilson. There was a personal connection there that made a lot of that work, and we need to be sure that that becomes more of a process and not focused on 2 individuals.
So Matt's nodding. I guess you have that on your radar? Good, okay.
Yeah, and so that, as I was thinking about this, and that became sort of the next tier where I was, realizing how important the connection is between our two superintendents and our middle school principal and the principal at the high school. And so to, ensure that they maintain a professional dialogue and around these issues, I think.
And our counselors are also in contact. Kim Reed is in contact very closely with high school.
And then, like Josh said, if I'm paying more attention because I do get the communications from the high school. If there are things, I know they're focusing very closely on special education, how to, address needs in-house and things like that. So if there are lessons that we can learn or things that could be transferred, information of that nature, that would be more on the administration side. But, I think that's
Well, you guys share that, right? Best practice, I'm sure.
And so, Mary, when you suggested, and I'm glad that you suggested it, because I don't feel like I want to, make any request of you that makes more work for you or Christine, but I think, if just sending an email, if it's not too much trouble after a meeting, if there's something relevant, that would probably be really helpful.
Yeah, no, I think it's, and I think I had 2 bullets in the one that I sent, but
Yeah.
typically there's not a lot, and I would encourage you, I think I include the agenda or a link to the agenda. I would encourage you to read through the agenda and ask if there's something that you're curious about that we might have discussed.
Okay.
I think the simple act of a mid-month email for the, make sure that we are not totally out of cycle with your meetings is useful, so thanks for doing that. Okay.
And then the last thing was, there are these regular communications coming from the high school, school committee news, superintendent sends updates and a memo, and the principal sends regular communications. If our school committee, were subscribed to those lists, I think that would be, you could read them or not read them, but I think
we have parents of high schoolers, right? So you can read it.
Yeah.
It's curated for us. I have no intention of reading about the high school till next year. I can tell you that right now.
All right.
And I'm sure I'll be very busy with it next year. But we could do, but I kind of echo Mary. We're K through 8 centric, as I think we should be. And for those of us who have children going to across the Great Divide, as parents, I think we can bring that information to the committee.
Okay.
Okay, I want to keep moving because still lots of things to do. The next, but thank you for the list, and if you want to maintain it in some way that has structure, I think it's fine. But it should be included in the information that's posted. Let me ask Cynthia. So things not in the original packet that are brought in, we can post it, right? We can post it as if it was part of the packet? Seems like we should.
It wasn't on the agenda?
No, it's on the agenda, but the companion material.
It was handed out at the meeting. It
was handed out at the
part
meeting.
of the public record.
Yeah, you posted, right? Okay, thank you. So, speaking of on the agenda or not, this is FY19 and also, I would hope we would say FY20 budget update. And I'll be very brief about the FY20 and then turn it over to Susan. We had originally intended to have, to present the budget for public hearing today, but we didn't do it, and we missed our little window with the newspapers. So we intend to do that at the December, is it 12th? 11th? What's the date? The Wednesday of December. I think it's 12. But I have to ask Mr. Triola, is there any chance that guideline comes out before that?
No.
Okay.
Well, is there any chance?
No. Is there a reasonable chance?
No, I mean, typically we've done it the following week.
Okay. So, but I don't think we should hold up our process. We've vetted it through your committee. I guess that's a kind of a question.
No,
We didn't hold it up last year.
Yeah, we don't typically, because when are you coming out with it? Before Christmas?
Well, we haven't discussed the specific timelines in previous years. We've issued the guideline budget the week of the 16th, so the week following. Typically, I don't know the date of the working session with the board of selectmen.
Okay.
So my advice, my personal advice would be for you to do your process, vote on a budget,
Yep.
And then, because I think as the liaison of the schools, I'd like to have
That.
voted on budget.
Okay, that's what I was asking. So, okay, so the calendar will be then that we will post the notice of public hearing in the week before or whatever is it got to be the Friday before or the Friday before the Friday before?
Friday before the Friday before.
The Friday before, so you've got that on your calendar.
Yeah, Ms. Keeler already knows.
Okay,
so just have to-
and so we'll have a budget hearing to open I guess open the
Yeah.
meeting next time, and we will take a vote on the budget. But I will mention that we did have a pretty good meeting with the FinCom, and I thought we certainly got our points across. We also have had a meeting with long-term caps in municipal facilities where we discussed some capital items. We can discuss that later. So that's where we are with the FY20 budget. Now, Susan, would you like to say anything about the
So I've
19 budget?
placed the budget update for FY19 at each of your seats.
Mhm.
Is it in the
So the
packet?
public hearing
No.
already is at the next meeting.
There's nothing remarkable at this time.
Okay.
The only item in the red is out-of-district tuition, but that we anticipated, and when we receive our circuit breaker funding back into the budget, that will be resolved.
Quick question for you about this, Sue. My understanding of the encumbered line is these are expenses that you've already committed to, so you put the money aside for?
Yeah.
So we've got now, only into November, less than 4% of our budget that we haven't committed that we're spending?
Right.
That's generally how it works.
Right.
Because salaries and tuitions and things are
We try to
encumbered.
project out for the entire year.
Projecting and committing are slightly different things, though.
Well, so total encumbered are two things. Purchase orders, which is actual commitment,
That's right.
and then manual encumbrance. For example, salary lines are a manual encumbrance. I don't do a purchase order.
And a
but-
contractually obligated
Yep,
payment, like a bus payment or a
Yeah.
tuition, right?
But you go to buy some supply, that's not on the encumbered line
That's
unless you've already
correct,
bought,
unless
unless you've already
somebody-
issued the purchase report.
correct. And keep in mind, all throughout the year, we can liquidate a purchase order, change a purchase order. So oftentimes with contracted services, say in operations, we go to the previous year and see what our expenses were for certain contracted vendors. And we'll say, do a purchase order not to exceed that amount of money.
We'll get some back. 'cause
Yep,
it's-
and we reevaluate it throughout the year.
Right. But to Josh's point, and if you add back in circuit breakers, so your total balance is more like $80,000. That's still only 1% of the encumbered amount, right? It's minuscule compared with the encumbered amount,
Right.
and that's how it goes, right? But, so to go through all that, do you feel we're on track with our budget?
I do feel we're on track.
Okay.
And the majority of our spending for the school year hits us at specific times. This is a very slow time as far as supplies. or
Yeah, but we're looking forward
unanticipated.
through June 30, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay. Any other comments on the budget? All right, thank you. All right, Mr. O'Shea, tell us about.
Well, I'm
the
just
new
happy to announce
facilities.
that we've conducted a search to replace the irreplaceable David Flannery, who's retiring after more than 40 years working in the district, not to mention the years he went to school here. Thank you to, we had a wonderful committee that worked on that. Two of our custodial maintenance staff, Steve Till, Rich Price served there, Christine Lair, Kate Reed served, Bill Rizzo, Sue Prey, and Linda Venari. I managed all of them. We came up with our top candidate, and we're happy that he's accepted the position, Robert Furtado. He's presently a facility director in Stoneham, Mass. He has background as a facility person, engineer in Beverly. He's certified MCCPO. He's got a facility management certificate, so he's got all the things we want. He's got Bill Rizzo's endorsement. Bill was involved in the tours and making sure we vetted everyone, so we're pleased that Robert's going to be joining us. The plan is that Robert's going to join us starting in December, so we'll have an overlap with David Flannery to hopefully learn as much as he possibly can from David in the operations of the the facility before David retires at the end of December.
I notice he's performed state elevator inspections, so might come in handy.
Is that real?
It says on his resume.
Is he certified to
He's
inspect
a
elevators?
certified,
We don't need him to inspect it, we need him to fix it. Right?
Well,
Well, I'm
no, we've got
hoping he can
elevators around
replace
town
them.
that we spend thousands of dollars certifying.
Really?
Really?
So that's the other thing, and he's coming on board, we've had the conversation with the Municipal Facilities Committee. He's aware that we may be asking him to do some work for the town in a variety of different
So we had that meeting, which we discussed it, and in a nutshell, the work that the Facilities Committee has is much greater than the amount of time that he could spare.
correct.
However, I was thinking, and I haven't talked to the Facilities Committee about this, we are seeking alternate members. Might he have time to participate as an alternate member of the Municipal Facilities Committee, providing a bridge between the
I think that's a
City's
good idea. Actually, I
organizations.
think it's a very good idea. Are non-residents allowed to serve on committees? I guess they could be invited to, right?
in that case, it would be a selectman's appointment.
Can a selectman appoint a non-resident to serve on a committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's-
Yeah, we have town employees.
Okay, so town employees can serve on committees. Okay, good. I think it's a great idea.
And
We're open to working with the town in any way we can support.
Right.
do you want to ask him first, or should I?
When I spoke with him, he understands where we are. I mean, part of the reason he's available is because his school and town are doing a similar thing, only they're bigger, so he's not sure what the future holds for him there.
Understood.
I think to just build on Josh's point, we did have a meeting with the municipal facilities and long-term caps. Thought it was a pretty good meeting, wide-range discussion. I agree with Josh, it's clear that the town has project needs greater than what we could help them with. If you recall, last year when it first came up, the Municipal Facilities Committee was here and mentioned maybe 4 hours a week. Well, now they're up to a half-time position, so they've already themselves recognized that.
It's 20%.
But, didn't they say 50? I thought-
It was 20.
Well, first it went to 4 hours, it was 10%, then it went.
It was
20.
never 4 hours.
It was never 4 hours?
It was never 4
Okay,
hours.
maybe it was, I'm sorry, I misremember. It was 20, then it went to 50.
Yeah.
It's probably 100. But it's possible that, no, they have quite a lot of projects. I mean, they really do, and I think they underestimate the time-consuming nature of those projects. However, and Josh and I are on the same plane here, I think, there is a skills match that perhaps, and we don't know the guy yet, but if Robert is a skilled guy, he could maybe help in that they would not need to hire as high caliber an individual to, no, I shouldn't say high caliber, not as credentialed or experienced an individual to do maybe more of a project management function and less of an oversight function. So it's worth exploring, and we have told the town that we're, open to help, as Jim said. So I think it's great. Look forward to meeting him. He starts the 1st?
December 1st, yes.
Very good. Okay. Okay, that's great. And do you want to review your revised goals?
I'm happy to review the goals. I made some adjustments to the language after getting some feedback. So you have a revised list of goals in your package.
Just tell us what you changed.
I really just changed the opening sentences and a couple of them. So really nothing is I won't say nothing of substance changed, but the first goal is focused on instructional leadership and evaluation. The second goal stays focused on parent and family engagement. The third goal stays focused on district improvement goals, all the other goals in the school improvement plan. And the fourth goal remains focused on the school committee's goal of exploring other opportunities at the middle school level and our use of resources from K through 8.
Okay.
So if you compare them, there's just some minor language tweaking and I elaborated a little on that second family engagement professional practice goal because we are in the process of bringing this new student information system in. So I incorporated that into the goal also.
All right. Well, we do plan to vote it tonight, so let me open it for discussion if there are any comments.
You want a motion?
No, not yet. We'll do it later. Just discussion, any discussion of, while we're just in open discussion session. Mary?
No, I met with Jim last week, and and I'm good with them.
Melinda?
Same.
Good, okay, Josh, good, okay, very good. Susan, let's talk about the discard list.
So this is our discard
you're
list.
gonna-
Yeah, I'll try, right?
All right.
Discard
I
list,
don't know.
the language we use on the discard list is always kind of confusing and troublesome. So what we have here is predominantly iPads they're no longer functioning because the operating system, we can't load new operating systems on them, and the operating system needs to be updated in order for the apps that we use to actually work, so they become obsolete. So we're in the process of moving these iPads on. If we agree to discard them, then we can make them available to other town offices and agencies, even though in discussion, even it would just become a burden to someone else, right? We move these iPads on, but we're willing to offer them for their use. The other items that are becoming on a discard list are projection units, and they're just really not functioning at the optimal level now, and they're part of our transition to, replace them every 5 years.
So Apple's an extremely clever company, right? So they make
Built-in obsolescence.
when you said they're not functional, they actually are plenty functional. There's just no.
Yeah, so we'll keep,
Up-to-date
if
operating
you want to
system.
use them for checking your email, or if you want to use them for searching the web,
Right.
you can use them for those components.
Right.
But as far as all the apps that teachers actually utilize them with.
So a question then, we talk about town employees. Teachers are town employees. And are we offering to teachers if they want them for a project?
Well, I didn't say town employees. First, we offer them to town offices, I think.
Before we declare something surplus, we have to offer it back to the town.
Well, certainly we do that.
So-
The town will most likely say no thanks,
We give the list to Tim.
right?
He passes it or, offers it out. Council on Aging is the department that often comes back
Okay.
to us.
And they do take some?
Right, and then when we have surplus like this, we do often offer items very low cost to staff. We have a company we sell things back to for,
That's what I was.
yeah,
So that's usually, when you say low cost, we get a price that they would give us for it, and then we
Yes.
offer it internally, say, if you can
Right.
match that price, that's what we get.
but,
Does the third party take all of those, or?
not always.
Okay, so
but,
the price might be zero.
So I think,
have to
no,
say,
this
Nanette
is,
Johnson in the tech department does a boatload of work, just making sure the company knows the condition of these pieces of equipment.
and what did they say, like, they may have a $15 value if we actually have the compatible charger, which is,
Okay, but
We're not
to
sure
me, 15 is
about
roughly
that.
zero. So I guess my question is, after the town departments have a crack at it, we have teachers, we have students, do we want to?
We've never offered to students.
Why wouldn't we?
I don't know that, Dave. We never have.
I don't-
I would say that we haven't always had this.
We have a
much.
lot right here.
I know.
So I guess, I don't know if teachers feel like weighing in on this, but there are a bunch of these, I don't know if you have the list in front of you, but there are a bunch of iPad 2.1s, is that what that means?
Yeah.
The other thing is we offer these up at no responsibility.
Well, we're not taking responsibility for it, we'll wipe them, but, and they don't run the latest and greatest software, but they're otherwise usable, right? Council on Aging, people like to use them. So that's my question.
we could do that, we could offer them
Is there any,
$15.
does that sound like anything the teachers or that you think the students would be interested in? Not really?
I'll jump.
But it's occasional.
I mean, the reality is, a lot of these are replacements, so all of our teachers have high
Well,
function.
yeah, everybody else has.
All
it.
all the students in the
Honestly,
classrooms
most
have
students
them,
have a
everyone
bunch
who's
of
running the
them.
apps.
No, we're an affluent community. What about not less affluent communities, school systems? I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
I'm offering to provide a connection with refugee servicing agencies.
There you go.
That's a wonderful idea.
Right. I'd much rather do that than get $15 from somebody that wants a charger. It's just not
Yeah,
worth
just because they don't run the latest operating system.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to see us, we got there's 50 here, right?
At least.
Can you just give us your name and your,
Oh, sorry, Camelia Roshka, Brook Street, ROSPA.
Susan will contact you. Okay.
Amazing that.
Very good. Okay. So now, at 9 o'clock, we're going to try to tackle some of these policies.
All right, so you want me to start off with the policies?
You want to start? Go ahead.
We can start off, because I think the first policy we're going to look at is the anti-bullying policy. So what we've provided in this package, we have a copy of our anti-bullying policy as it's been revised 2010, 2012, 2014. And then you can see we provided the bullying prevention policy from MASC, which is a little more substantial. The fact of the matter is, the policy from the MASC contains one component that I think we should incorporate into our policy, which is where it says, page 2, prevention and intervention plan. And it says the superintendent and/or their designee shall oversee the development of a prevention and intervention plan. I think that's a piece that's missing from our policy. But then, we do have a prevention and intervention plan.
So, do you need a policy to direct you to do something if you're doing it anyways?
No, we maybe not. So this is where we get into that place where, like, the MASC policy is larger, more cumbersome. Our policy is fairly streamlined. We can make it more streamlined. And the fact is, the important piece is the prevention and intervention plan that we have in place. Now, of course, we also need to update that.
Is that plan, but that should be tethered to a policy. We should reference it, I guess, at the very least, right?
Reference the plan?
Yeah, in the policy, that there is a plan.
We've had a plan.
It's referenced in the policy at the bottom of the first page.
Yes, so it is, as outlined, yes, right, okay. I think that's right, you're right. Thank you.
And we've had a plan for 8 years now at least?
Absolutely.
The last version of it was 8 years old.
In the version, this is in practice now. It's aligned with the state template that they produced in 2010. But I think this is additionally, if we go with the streamlined traditional policy that the Carlisle School Committee has, and then we can look at this. Just review it, because I think it's in practice, it's being utilized, it's effective, it's in line with the state requirements.
You're talking about which's, ours or theirs?
I'm talking about the bullying prevention and intervention.
And where do I get that? That's online?
Yeah, if you go on right on our website.
Yep.
There's 3 buttons, 4 buttons, 5 buttons across. There's anti-bullying.
Just don't search for it.
It'll give you everything. We put it right on top. It's easily accessible.
Now, was the plan recently modified when we brought in the LAS?
So we could modify it because we could mention Obeas in here.
Yep.
But
in the plan or in the policy?
I wouldn't mention Obeas in the policy.
No,
because
right,
it's
but
getting
can I
too-
see?
But in the plan, it references that we will have, practices and programs in place for instructional purposes around anti-bullying.
Okay. Okay. So,
for your consideration.
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I'm trying to understand. Usually you give us a policy, Jim, that's marked up with edits as suggested by the administration. Now we've got 2, right? We've got the MASC and ours. What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting in this case, we stay with the streamlined policy of the Carlisle Public Schools. We provided the MASC piece as part of that ongoing learning practice of comparing what they have and what they might offer us, along with what we
I want to go, so I took the time last night to compare them, and I'll go through them, I'll just go through the topics and just the differences. So the goals are the same, the language is the same. The definition of bullying is more or less the same. The 5 criteria are more or less the same. Then cyber is a whole passage, like a long passage in MASC, that is only referenced in our policy somewhere as being, electronic form is also bullying. So there's really no specific thing about cyber, which we know is a big deal. So I'm putting that out there as a difference to consider. Now maybe they're too detailed in the JICFB policy, but it's enumerated. Then we have the child's right is to feel safe at school. It's kind of buried in their policy. Staff we do have, staff must report and so forth. So we do have a little bit of the quote-unquote prevention and intervention plan, but we're very spare because we have the reference, and they're very, granular. So I take Jim's point that if we have it already in our plan and it meets the same kind of things, then we probably don't need to go into that much depth. But we ourselves are somewhat redundant, I think, in that down at the bottom of our policy, the plan applies to students and members of the school, including but not limited to, which we've also said up top. I mean, we certainly don't need to say it twice, maybe not to say it at all. I mean, it seems, even for a short policy, it's kind of redundant. And then they have a whole bunch of things, which again, I think are I haven't read the plan, so I don't know, but I assume all this stuff about false accusations and the rights of parents and confidentiality, that's all in your
And
plan?
the process we go through and the
Okay,
responsibilities of
okay.
investigation and
Investigation procedures,
communication.
those are all called out in the plan.
And training and all that, assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
Training and
Okay.
student program.
And then finally, our references are, we want to always make sure that our references are up to date. We don't at all reference the MASC policy, which we've taken, I think, either we've taken language from them or they've taken language from us, but I got to believe it's the first way. So we should reference that.
Much of the language comes from the state. So the state
Okay, so maybe that's true. Okay.
came up with their template.
How do we check the references then when we review these? Because I don't check them.
Right, but
Do you, Nancy, do you go into the MGL and stuff? When we check?
Not if it's already in there, I don't.
But in there from 3 years ago,
The
right?
Mass General Law can change.
I mean, have we gone into?
Yeah, I mean, the one, I agree with everybody's comments on the no need for the MASC policy service. But one thing they do is make sure that everything's up to date. We don't really do that. We look at the words and we say, oh yeah, the references look right.
So is it necessary for us to incorporate references to the state laws that may change?
I don't know.
And if it isn't, are we just burdening ourselves with keeping up to date something which we're not required to
That's a
have?
good question. That's an Andy question. I don't really know the answer.
I mean, maybe it's useful to people, but they can do the searches as well as we can. And if we're not required to have the reference to mass law in there,
Well, I think if we've,
We should be the ones doing the search to make sure that our policy is consistent with the current law.
that's different from saying that our policy references.
Well, if
Oh,
you're
correct.
making sure it's consistent with it, you might as well reference.
no, there's two different, right, but they're two very important points. So I think one good reason to always check the MASC policy is because they are making sure. And if we see something different, we have to think about it.
Okay.
So
Well,
I'd say that's a good
reference the
check.
law, so we can
Right.
just jump off from there.
I think if we, plagiarize, let's say, if we take language in whole cloth from somewhere, we ought to reference it. That's just good scholastic practice, right? Other than that, maybe you're right. Maybe we don't have to say anything.
Another point I want to make, and I'm not sure where I stand on this, but I want to raise the issue. We're something less than crisp on where the school policy ends in a child's life and a child's day. Does it stop when they get off the bus? When they say goodbye to their friend from home, down the street? When they walk into their house? Where does the school's reach stop?
So the reach with this legislation that was passed, the anti-bullying legislation, our reach stops, well, it can continue if behaviors outside the schoolhouse can be brought into the schoolhouse. Our reach can continue, meaning if someone is being bullied outside the school, and we can see this is gonna have an impact inside the school, then we have, this legislation has given us authority to become involved in that.
But what about if the kid is brought to tears at home because of a cyber?
Or because of a
That's-
sibling?
Well, that's another
But
question.
does it go that far too?
Well, it would bring it to our attention, right? If it became a school thing, we would work with the family to address it. But if it's that's what the cyber piece is. If this is going on outside of school, the legislation that was passed gave the school power to become
But
involved.
we are fairly silent on cyber in general, right? And they're not. So that's a question. I mean, do you feel, you have a policy from 2010 when people had BlackBerries, if they even did.
No.
Yeah, what? Well, the kids didn't, but anyway,
Yeah,
you have a policy from
programmed.
2010 that hasn't been updated, I guess, because otherwise it would say it's been updated. And you have 0 about cyber in the policy, plan, I should say.
It was updated in 2014,
I'm sorry,
revised
the
in 14.
plan is 2010, where's the plan? Right, this says, this is 2010. And then the policy doesn't really say anything about cyber. So that's really my biggest question in comparison.
The
Yeah, go ahead.
second paragraph that I remember adding electronic expression. Now, it's certainly a light touch, but it is there.
Yes, right.
Written, verbal, or electronic expression.
Yes, I agree with you.
I think we cover cyber in that rather broadly, but I'm less than comfortable with a ambiguous expression of where our reach stops.
What would you suggest?
Debate on it, discussion on it.
Okay, but where do you suggest it should stop? Or should it even stop? I mean, why even have a stopping point?
Yes, Jim, I guess I'm a little, you said that we have the right to protect the student, but don't we have the obligation to? I mean, because if they're whether
Yes.
they're bullied at home or on the bus or in the school building, it's going to impact their school day.
Correct. So the legislation gave us the authority to become involved. So it's not like a perpetrator can say, well, this didn't happen at school, it happened at home, or it happened online. The legislation says that the school has the authority because it's something that does come into the schoolhouse between those two students and that child's experience, that we can become involved.
But this policy doesn't restrict it to, from my read, a student in this building and a student somewhere else.
It doesn't even restrict a student. I mean, what about an abusive parent?
Well, yeah, we have other authority, like we're mandated reporters, so if we find out, then we take it to just.
Different definition.
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, that is different, but to Jim's point, whatever the thing is that the child brings with them emotionally when they show up at school, you're saying then you have the right to. You ask the child what's going on, and if you find out that there's
something going on outside this building,
outside, you take action.
Become involved.
Right, so it never ends, I think, right?
That seems a little far-reaching.
It depends on what it is, right?
It seems overly broad. And, if that broad power is used wisely, can be effective and can be a good thing. But a policy with powers as broad as that, to say anything that affects a child's life in any way, whether it comes in this building, from a student in this building, or from anybody else in the world, we have the authority to get involved in, I think is overreaching.
I have to agree.
What is?
I think we have to get the specific language of the law out.
Well, the law, you say, gives us
gives
us the
holds us
authority to
responsible, and there's a responsibility that we have. So if
Can you give an example of something where this kind of thing is played out? Like, do you have an example from?
It could be cyberbullying, right? You could go home at night and be one child's in their home doing their research, and another child's in their home, and there's just this communication going back and forth, or they're on a, I don't know what kids do, like Instagram or their Snapchat. So they're in their chat, right? So the chat is them sharing stuff, and one child just continues to harp on another child, making derogatory remarks, driving them crazy. Well, a defense could be like, well, they come to school, and a child can say, like, you have no authority over me. I can do whatever I want.
Well, so I think that's
This is part of the
specifically, by
school day.
us incorporating the more specific language about cyberbullying, I think that's less of a vague gray area, because that's been established that cyberbullying is something under the purview of this kind of bullying policy. But some of these other things that we're talking about, I think what we need to be careful when we develop the policy, that we have clear language defining what bullying is, where it can happen. This policy from MASC does have a lot of that in it, a little bit more clear than ours. And then, making reference to the plan. And if if it's time for us to look at the plan, maybe we should do that too.
I think we have to. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, I think we should.
Yeah. Listen, what we've done in the past with these is somebody has to volunteer to do the body and fender work of looking at the plan, the MASC policy. I don't know, Mary, if the region policy is of any use here?
It's, I was just looking at it, the regional policies, I don't know for sure, but it looks like the MASC policy almost verbatim.
Okay, so I think, I mean, in the past, because at 9:15, trying to hammer through all these is, we have the broad outline, right? So I think somebody needs to say, I'm willing to take it, try to do a draft that captures the
I
same.
can do that.
Yeah.
David, I think there's a community comment that's eager to
Oh,
get
yeah,
out.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille Yaroshka, Brook Street. I do want to commend you for taking very close look at the
Yeah.
Massachusetts mask policy and compare it to Carlisle's. So first of all, there's a lot of research out there that points out that there is a very direct connection between bullying inside and outside the school and school performance. And this is why the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has passed this law, and I second Mr. O'Shea's point that this law does offer the authority, but also to Mr. Flosky's point, the responsibility of school following up. We like it or not, it's the law. And because it's the law, I suggest and I support taking a very close look at the law itself and remembering that both the Association of School Superintendents and the MASC have lawyers that look at this, and the plan that MASC has is very likely passed by council. And as you probably know, there have been several legal actions with respect to bullying and cyberbullying. So if Carlisle intends to protect itself, I suggest that we collaborate very closely with MASC and with the Association of School Superintendents.
Thank you. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that we prefer a lighter touch if we can get away with it, but we need to make sure we're specific on the important things. So is that something you and I and Andy need to talk about?
Let's
You
see,
want to start?
we'll put one together.
We, who's we, Kimasabi?
I'll start one, and then I'll share with you at Tuesday's meeting, or maybe not this Tuesday's meeting.
Okay, but what's, at some meeting we
Yeah.
will share, okay. Okay, but I think we should, to the point just raised, I mean, because of this one, we probably should just get Andy's thoughts on, you know, how tightly we should hew to, say, MASC.
Makes sense.
Okay. All right, so that we will, thank you, we'll take that up. Well, we may or may not be ready for a vote next time, but we'll, probably won't be. Probably this is one of the ones that will float a revision next time, and it'll probably be voted, you know, sometime later. But everybody should probably take a look at the plan that's on the website. Okay, the next policy is school attendance.
So the next policy is our Carlisle Public Schools school attendance policy. And then after that is the student absences and excuses policy, which is the MASC version that aligns.
Right.
In reading the Carlisle Public School policy, just that first paragraph, it starts putting in rules and regulations and expectations, and I'm not sure where they all stem from and what they're.
Why even bother?
They're highly quantified.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So if we looked at the student absences and excuses, this is more along the lines of our practices here,
Yep.
that we want to make sure that we're in contact with parents and that they understand and what the expectations
Right.
are and how we're going to communicate. And I think this, we've made some deletions to the MASC policy, especially around the piece, because it speaks about high schools too, it incorporates high schools and graduation piece of that. But I would put forth that we use that as a draft to see if that would work.
The JH also.
Yes.
Yeah, I found the Carlisle policy weird.
There's a lot of
It goes into
emotion
this
in it,
long
isn't there?
chapter 76 stuff.
Formulas too.
Yeah.
And then it goes into like tardiness, and that's a bad thing, and, you know, then you have, it's inconsistent, right? There's 5 days in the school year, and then there's half days, and there's 9 months and 6 months and trimesters. I mean, it's got all this weird math in it, you know, so.
Yeah, just added, the superintendent may excuse absences, reasonable
Right.
cause, up to
So I
7.
support
like,
your-
what happens to day 8?
Yeah, I support
That's that
your
rule.
point of view.
And I think it's more important that we're just in communication with families around.
Right, I think
absences.
that's right. And Mary?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is we had a lot of discussion around this at the high school.
Yeah.
And a phrase that we added in this policy was at the end of the second paragraph in JH, it says, the reasons that they can be, students can be absent.
Yep.
The last one is observance of major religious holidays. And we added, let me get the language. Now I've lost it. Major religious holidays or cultural observances.
Okay, that's good. Very politically correct.
Cultural proficiency.
Sounds good. Cultural proficiency or cultural observances?
Her cultural
The
proficiency is
wording,
evidenced
we
by.
did it in the
her
name of
cultural
cultural
I see.
proficiency, but we added the phrase or cultural observances.
Very good, okay. Good, okay, so Jim, your advice is you'll retool this a little bit to
Yeah,
meld it?
Yes, we will.
Okay, good. All right, and then finally, homework.
and the homework policy is, we're presenting it pretty much as is. The MASC didn't have a homework policy template, and to be honest with you, I'm not making a recommendation that we change this policy, but this is just kind of like a philosophy. It's kind of like, here's what we believe about homework, as opposed to, sometimes when we have homework policies, it may be a policy that says you may not, like teachers may not give homework over vacation, or you might not give homework on religious holidays or cultural observance days.
That's more of a public policy type
Yes.
of
Well, this is a policy.
statement. I know, but my question was, is this really a policy? Is this just, like you said, a philosophy? And if it is a philosophy, I think, was it sort of aligned with the work that the SACU did around homework, like a couple of years ago?
There was quite a big effort around that.
Yeah, they worked a lot.
Not exactly
on-
agreement on the outcome, though.
Oh, I'm not
amongst the
sure about
community.
that. I'm not sure that they,
The various parent focus groups had divergence of views.
there were some kind of top-level recommendations, though, I think, that came out of that work. The SAC looked really closely at school-wide homework practices and ways to, and I think we haven't really established consistent practices and incremental, sort of view of homework across the school. I don't know if it's worth looking at what they did. First question is, do we need a policy about homework? And if we do, is it really just about more procedural, like, we don't assign homework over?
Well, this is not procedural.
So I think, I'm not sure we need a policy around homework.
But I think it's useful to have
If we had,
something to inform school practice around homework, across all grades.
and this is a very general way of setting some expectations, but I'm not really sure what's specifically being said here.
So,
like, is this a
what is-
policy?
Yeah,
what is the point of a policy? It's either to guide administration action,
Right.
or when a parent or student is concerned, why are we doing things a certain way? They can reflect on they can be referred to the policy. Well, the school committee said to do so. See, it's right here in their policy. How does this answer either one?
Well, it answers the second one. We think homework's a good thing.
This is more like,
Right.
there's an understanding of homework and its purpose and how it could be used.
Right.
I wouldn't give blanket
So,
value
okay.
to assignments that kids take home with them, because some are valuable and some may not be as valuable.
Right, so is your advice to scrap it?
I'm not going to advise, I wouldn't recommend. I guess I don't see what the meat and potatoes are here that we could refer back to.
So-
Teachers would refer to, because teachers are the ones who give the homework. I don't think teachers are referring to this policy as they consider their homework assignment.
So may I suggest that in the short term, we scrap the policy, and in the medium term, we look to create a new policy based on the SAC efforts, based on parent input, based on teacher involvement as
So
well,
it'll be the
and that we
logical-
formulate, not that we, in the span of 1 month, put that whole process in place.
Okay.
We basically say, this isn't much use to us.
Right.
Let's put this aside, but let's take our time to get it right.
So those references you talk, is that something, is there a homework committee or something? No.
There was
No, she's talking
work
about
done
3 years
by the
ago or
School
something?
Advisory Council
Oh, okay.
did some.
So who should take the
work.
lead on, I like your suggestion, but who should do that?
Jim, I would,
Jim, okay.
and I'll turn to someone else.
So,
Okay.
But I think that's the way it works.
Yeah.
just as an, yeah, you delegate.
I mean,
So just
but
as
you
an
want to involve me,
example,
you
though,
ask
because I
for
think
it.
it's going to be different for middle school and elementary, but here, in this policy, it says the amount of homework assigned to students should be set by the grade level teams at the beginning of each school year in consultation with the principals. So what's happening is you have, for example, third grade will say, well, we're not gonna give any homework except for just
Right.
major assignments. And then, but second grade has homework to be done at home. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like you're sort of growing an incremental, like, sort of, at grade levels are deciding independent of each other what they're gonna do about homework, you know, and.
Yes and no, because there's still a principal over that.
Well, I mean, but the policy says that they can do that, whatever.
They can do it, but so can Dennett say, no, you're not, right?
It's just a hard, like, the reality is, trying to legislate homework is a difficult thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I
right?
think we-
Because
Sure.
you get to a place where,
Okay.
and we even recognize it here in paragraph 2 or 3, where what a teacher may assign, thinking it's one amount of work for one child, there's so much, one child may do it in half the time, and one child will take 4 times that amount.
Right, so we don't want to get to that level. What we
Yeah.
really want on the top level is just to say, as a school, we have a strategy or a vision or an idea about this, and make a framework to say, okay, we think it should be this, you know, teachers should do their best to not only conceptualize what they're doing for homework in their grade, but think about the level up below and above and how it fits into that continuum.
Yes, Ms. Mustafi.
Okay, so don't we have already expectations that the child in each grade has certain amount of time to complete homework that is appropriate for the age and also the ability of a child? So the child should not be doing 20 minutes in the first or second grade, 20 minutes reading. When they get to the 8th grade, the expectation goes up to what, like half an hour, an hour?
It's not a
So
lot.
when they do get to high school, the expectations is that they will spend 2 hours of doing homework for the classes at their learning level. So it's very difficult to, in my view, it's very difficult to put it from top-down policy on what is each teacher supposed to give for your child, my child, or another child in terms of homework or a class level when you have such a variety of expectations, level of teaching. Math doesn't require as much as other classes. I mean, then we really are getting into so much detail. Do we really need to give so much governance, or can we just allow the teachers
Well, the
to
policy,
work with
but
the
Eva, the
teacher?
policy doesn't prescribe it, it just outlines, I mean, the policy may be
There
useless,
isn't-
but it's
yes.
not granular, it's not a procedure, it just says, homework's a good thing and teachers will figure out
It
how.
also doesn't say whether its purpose is assessment, whether its purpose is reinforcing what's learned, with first exposing in a flip model, or simply building up their homework muscles so that by the time they get to high school, they can do more of it. It doesn't, it's building work study habits.
But we don't need to, we don't put causality for lots of the policies, right?
Right, is it enough to just say homework is a good thing and allow the teachers
Okay,
to do
I-
it? So-
You're right, I don't think we should have like this interchange, I think it sounds like we should scrap this and replace it with something more useful. And at next meeting, you can report out.
And we're gonna work with
what
the
you're gonna
SAC
do.
because homework is always a relevant topic of.
I think the points are all valid, but I don't know that, Josh, every time we don't have to get into all the details of teaching, right? Like,
Right.
homework
I
builds
think
brain muscles.
you have to get to the heart of looking at the big picture of how, as a school, how do we handle, you know, how do we sort of grow that over the 8 years or whatever. And we're not going to prescribe to teachers, but
Right.
a guideline of what's appropriate amount of homework, what kind of.
I don't even think we should be guidelining. I think the broad thing that Josh did say is, and Eva said, homework's a good thing, and we should, to your point, I think, well, you guys will do it, but we should weave in the attributes of homework that, we should outline why we think homework's a good thing, right? And just give the guidance of.
Or what makes it good, how about that?
Well, right, or how it should be used to be good, right? Is it even?
As far as whether it's good, though, the research I've seen has said classroom instruction is far more effective than homework is.
Well, at what, though? At learning or at building good study habits? I mean, again, you have to parse it.
At student outcomes.
Yeah. So we all agree that homework in and of itself is not necessarily good, because we've all had bad homework.
Not all homework is good.
Right. Like,
It's the ability to learn.
let us. I think right now we'll table this, and we'll work with
SAC and come up with
a group of parents and
Don't fall
educators.
into-
If there are guidelines, we might.
Okay.
But I just would try to keep it top level and not get down into the.
No, I think he knows what to do.
And we can write the best policy ever. And next month,
Yeah.
it's a perpetual question and answer. And
Well, I would say it's an opportunity. Look, I like what Josh said earlier.
We will do.
You have a policy because either or both you need to give some more specificity to our vision about school through policy, or when people question that vision or in its implementation, we have a benchmark and we can say, we thought about this and this is what we think. So this is an opportunity to take a pretty big picture idea and not be granular and outline a vision of what makes it, how it helps the educational mission.
And also balance it against the mission of parents raising children, of which the school is only one component.
Right.
And to the extent that homework interferes with other education, may be detrimental.
Well,
So that
but it does
last
say-
paragraph
right.
speaks to that, which is nice.
And the word balance should show it, right? So, okay. Anyway, it's 9:30. We've gone through
It's only
the
9:30?
meat, well, only 9:30. We've gone through the meat of this thing. Are there any communications and correspondence?
Nancy, do we have any? None.
Great.
No one's talking to us.
A brief superintendent's report would be helpful.
So we talked about the budget, talked about the joint meeting, talked about the facility director. Thanks to the PTO and CEF, because both of them provide us with grants. CEF is going to be presenting the grants. Other than that, things are going. We've had a couple of events in the past. Outdoor education since we last met. The spaghetti supper, school pictures, Halloween parade, door decorating, which were fabulous.
Yeah,
Teachers
those
did a
are
great
cool.
job. Was 5th and 2nd grade running a buddies pajama drive. There's a 6th graders doing a co-drive for our friends in Lowell. Thanksgiving break is coming up. We had a professional day. We had a number of teachers went to NPEN for the professional development. We had a number of people here working on mindfulness, and then in the afternoon working on some of the elementary, middle school initiatives. And that's as quick as I can get. The only other thing that I might extend the meeting, we did leave off the articles of agreement from EDCO. Is something we were looking to vote on.
Right, that's
Did you need any more information on
No,
it?
but I can give you my take on the whole thing if you're interested.
Sure.
I want to.
Yeah.
So they have some liabilities, but they've got assets set aside
Who's
to
the
cover.
they?
EDCO.
Okay.
But they have assets set aside to cover those liabilities.
Yep.
So it doesn't fully cover it, but our exposure there is minimal. On the other hand, so from a debt to equity or debt to asset perspective, they're in good shape. From a cash or expendable assets to expense standpoint, not so much, but I don't know what to benchmark them against. So they've got basically 53 days worth of operating assets available. If their funding dried up, they very quickly shut the doors. I'm not sure if that's typical for organizations like that, but in organizations I've analyzed, that tends to be pretty low. But in terms of our liability, I'm comfortable that it's bounded. They've got, they took a loan for $1.2 million for improvements, leasehold improvements. Now, maybe $800K of that is owed. They sit on a cumulative surplus of $1.9 million, and they've got a remaining, they've got about $600K worth of set-aside assets restricted to only pay that obligation. So from a debt standpoint, I have no concerns.
So I'm glad you brought it up, because I actually, since we raced through the minutes and I was late, I neglected to mention, but we highlighted it. It didn't really show up in this. But I'd highlighted an area when I went through the minutes for the first time, because when I went back to the articles themselves, I was actually unclear. The article, the article that has to do with member termination.
Which is where the change is
Right,
occurring.
where the change is occurring. Is that red means they added it or they took it out?
The red is the addition.
Okay, so it says that the withdrawing member will continue to be liable to the collaborative for its proportional share of liabilities and any debts, claims, blah, 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 against the collaborative incurred during said committee's board membership, now added, which were the responsibility of the collaborative when the member became a member. So that's completely unclear to me. If Carlisle joined in 1990 and there was X and it decided to quit in 2020, it makes no sense. I don't understand that at all.
So I don't understand it as deeply as you might understand the financials. But on my superficial understanding of it, what they're saying is, what they experienced is we had a town left the collaborative.
Yep.
And they were just going to leave the collaborative. But the fact is, the collaborative held debt, and this town was part of that collaborative when it took on the debt, or joined the collaborative at a time and was aware of the debt that existed. And they were just making sure that if those 53 days came and went, and all of a sudden the debt needed to be called in, that town would still hold some liability.
The or came in, it didn't copy
So
this.
the changes, they understood
I see,
that they had language in there that identified that town was responsible for the debt was taken on while they were a member.
Right, or it was.
But
their-
someone held the debt initially, and when you join with eyes wide open. You should understand that you are responsible for the debt that currently exists. That's my
Okay.
superficial.
I missed the or, I see it now. It's very faint in the copy that I have, so, okay.
So are we leaving that the way it is then, David?
Well, we don't have a
We don't
choice.
change it.
We can't change it.
We're a member, and
Oh, I mean, no.
Oh, the minutes. Well, the minutes we should, you're right. I thought you were. Let's see. Well, if a member terminates his membership from ECHO, continues with the shares which are incurred at the time or during, yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's written correctly. And we've already approved, just take the highlight out. So I wrote that after I read this, and I guess I did interpret it the way you did, but it just seemed very weirdly written. But now that I see the or, the missing or, it makes more sense. Okay, so Josh, your take then is it's okay.
Well, so I looked at it from a different perspective. I looked at it from, gee, we're part of this thing.
Yeah.
We have obligations as part of it.
Yeah.
How much damage can these obligations do to us? What is our exposure here?
Right.
Not, should we approve this agreement, should we not approve this agreement? It was nothing to do with the agreement,
Right.
more, what is our financial exposure?
Right.
And my answer there is probably pretty minimal, because their debt is low,
Yeah.
their assets exceed their debt significantly.
Okay.
So that's my answer to what is our exposure.
All right. And we don't vote it anyway,
that's the
right?
end.
It's just information.
you do vote it.
We do vote it. What are we voting? To approve it?
To sign the contract?
Yeah.
But we didn't, it's not.
We didn't put it on the list, so we'll put it on for the next one, or we can.
So next, I don't think we can add now anyway, right?
All right, then we'll. put it
Can
on
we
for
add
the
or
next
not?
one. That should be fine.
Okay. Vote
Yeah.
EDCO articles, yeah. Okay.
We
All
did
right.
discuss this at the last meeting.
Well, we can vote it now if you want. I don't know. Are we allowed to vote things that aren't on the agenda?
We can make a motion to.
Yeah, well, he can't, but I can.
That would be good.
Go ahead.
I move to accept and endorse the EDCO Collaborative Articles of Agreement as amended.
I second.
Further discussion?
Since I can't see anything that you're looking at, I'm a little uncomfortable voting. I'd probably abstain.
Okay, if it helps you, you have
It's in the packet from
the
last year.
packet from last time.
October. Sorry about that, Mary.
So, Mary,
No, it's okay.
I can give you the reference. I mean, if you don't want to vote, you don't have to vote, but
Yep.
in the EDCO articles, and it was sort of maybe somewhat my mistake for bringing it up, but in the article that has to do with termination of a member, there was an addition, the only change to the existing, well, the only substantive change to the articles that were already in place is in the packet of last time, Article 10, Item 6, where, as Jim said, they add to the liability that a departing member has, the liability that that member undertook when it joined the collaborative. And I think in the minutes that we put out, we highlighted that area, and that's why I said I should have gone to it at the minutes, but we highlighted that area to make sure that basically I had interpreted correctly, which in hearing Jim, I believe that we have accurately characterized that section in the minutes that we just voted to approve.
I am surprised that it's that they're inheriting the liability as opposed to the net liability, because would they not be inheriting the assets that come along with it?
No, because they don't get those, right?
So when they leave, the assets that are there, is that part of?
They don't get an exit package, I don't think.
No, they get an exit package, but if there's been a cumulative increase in assets and a cumulative increase in liability.
Well, then there's less. Yeah, net liability,
Right.
Yes, right. Yes, you are. You are correct. It may be written, let's look at that. So do we want to wait then? Or do we want to vote?
I'm not saying to wait it, but I'm not going to change it because of my question, and I think our exposure is minimal, but I question the wording. I don't think it was very.
Well, there's a motion in front of us, and we have a discussion point. I'm losing track of where I'm going.
And I apologize, because we went from superintendent report to this.
That's okay, we needed to cover it, so.
Should we have taken more time?
It's a choice. Well, it's on the table, so I suppose we can vote by voice.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Jablonski, aye.
Stores abstained.
Okay, motion carries. All right. Mary, anything you want to report about the region that you haven't already said?
No, actually, interesting, but it's probably the only thing, the bulk of our discussion last night was about the budget for the high school.
How's it looking?
What's that?
How is it looking?
Higher than I personally would like, but, depending on, we were presented with a few scenarios. I think the short answer is going to be somewhere between a 3.5% and a 5-ish% increase.
Seriously?
Total over last year, total without the debt.
What? Two questions for you, Mary. One is, what drives the increase? And second, you said you're not 100% in agreement with it. What are the parts that you think are right, and what do you think are mistaken, or should be done differently?
No, I won't say I disagree. I just, as a taxpayer, those numbers are high. That's all I'm saying.
And what are the drivers?
So the typical drivers, right, are the same things, the staffing, right? But I think the big issues here that the district is going to talk to the FinComs and the Board of Selectmen in both towns about this, because what we're coming down to is how to fund OPEB and the E&D balance. So and what's important, I don't know if you've been reading the newspaper, but right, we're on a Moody's watch list at the region, and we have one of the highest OPEB balances in the state, so that's a good thing, but they're concerned about our use of E&D.
You mean one of the highest unfunded OPEB balances?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, no. One of the highest balances, a good thing,
Oh, it's a good thing. So why are we on a watch list then?
because of the E&D.
The E&D is a big part of the budget? What?
Yeah, we've been using it as a source of revenue, and that's going down. And Moody's apparently is more concerned about E&D, just generally speaking, using E&D as a revenue source than OPEB balances.
So they want, E and D. E and D is excess and deficiency. So it's a slush fund, basically, because it's a region.
Yeah.
So they have a little pot of money, and that's John, what's his name's legacy, right? Flaherty.
So Flair.
That's the Flaherty legacy. So what you're saying, let me try to paraphrase it, see if I got it right. It used to be a high balance, and they liked that because it was a cushion, and it's going down, so they think there's more risk?
Well, it's like, in
That's in a nutshell, yeah.
it's like in the town, our reserve fund is
Right.
a plus for the
Right.
credit agencies.
And is it going down because the towns are tightening the screws on it, or?
Yeah, and we've been using it as a source of revenue at the region. And you can only do that for so long, right?
You mean they've been drawing down on, like drawing down your free cash? Okay,
Yes.
I see,
Yes,
okay.
yes. So,
Yeah.
so,
Having said that, is there an expectation that the district is going to need to issue more debt?
because of this, no.
No, in the next decade.
I guess it depends on, so that this ties into the campus projects that are under consideration that we'll be talking about next week. I don't know. I can't say that. I can't speak for the committee. But there is not a big appetite to take on significant capital projects. But having said that, because it's a regional school system, both towns, the rating of both towns can be at risk because of the region, right? Because that's where the money's coming from if the region can't pay its bill.
Right, yeah.
So it's an issue for both towns as much as the regional district itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. But who's tackling, so
the real issues right now in the budget are kind of the right balance between OPEB and E&D, and then we're looking to either buy outright or lease laptops. So that's a big. I don't have that number in front of me. It's like
to
$250 million.
bring the budget down, you mean? To control the budget?
Yeah. Those are really the significant drivers that we are levers, I'll say.
When's the next teacher contract down there?
A year or 2 years out?
Okay, so it's not a variable in the budget you're talking about?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So again, there's a meeting with the Concord FinCom. I think that's next week, because I think we're really looking for some guidance, because it's more of a financial decision than any kind of a programmatic decision. You know, it's an educational decision.
About the balance between E&D and OPEB.
Yeah, I mean, that's, in my mind, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So the budget really is not up for debate, it's a question of how to fund it.
Well,
the budget's certainly up for debate.
yeah, I think two different things, right? The budget's always up for debate, especially when you nose past 3%. And then the other piece you just mentioned is presumably, maybe they've not overfunded, because you can't really do that, but they've been especially generous on their OPEB reserve, and what they really need to do is maybe knock that back a little bit and increase the E&D for the rating agency's benefit.
Right.
Okay.
So just as a frame of reference, the Concord FinCom guideline is 4.27%.
Wow. Lucky them.
Yeah. So
are they growing a lot in Concord?
Is Scott still there?
So is their enrollment growing? Is that why that is,
or
that why it's happening, or?
I can't offer insight there. I mean, the ratio is 75-25 right now.
Right.
No, I mean for Concord, you said Concord's budget. I mean, I guess you wouldn't know, but I've heard that the enrollment is growing in Concord.
Maybe it is. I mean, is the town growing?
Yeah.
Is there development? I don't know. Cynthia says yes. You know, we're somewhat
sure.
We're buffered to that because we're 25% of whatever they do, so.
For the regional, yeah.
And to the extent that they grow enrollment, that shrinks too.
If it's not coming from us, yes, right. And it's not, I guess, right? So our projected share is pretty constant.
Well, I don't know,
isn't
is it based on,
It used to
it's
be
based
higher.
on enrollment, right?
Yeah, of course,
I guess
of
that's,
course.
yeah.
Our share is based on enrollment, but if the overall costs go up because
it? Other people
other
hire
people are
more
enrolling, then we don't necessarily feel that
Right,
increase.
exactly, right. Okay, anyway, let's keep, anything else
So
from the
that-
region?
No, I was gonna say, that's the only real thing we talked about last night that's relevant here.
So, going back to the question on the 4 point something percent, what growth in number of students does that assume? What's the student
I
population growth?
don't have that number.
Because here, we're pretty much planning for flat students,
It's
but
not significant, I don't think.
Yeah, my impression is you're getting anecdotal evidence it is going up?
No, are we, so, are we still are we talking about, when you said the 4.7%, were you talking about Concord?
That's Concord's
School?
guideline for,
guideline.
Concord, not the regional.
well, no, for the
town.
The town of
And
Concord.
the school's going to come back with, yeah, we want 4.7.
That's the guide, Melinda's question is that the guideline from the town to the region or the town to its K through 8?
The town to the region.
Oh,
Okay.
The Concord guideline, Concord FinCom guideline for the region is
Yeah.
4.27.
4.27, 4.3, okay. Well, okay. Be interested to see what their other guidelines are, but nevertheless, as we say, we're two different districts, so. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Melinda, you want to
Sure.
talk about transportation or anything else?
No, just one more question for Mary. I did read the paper, and it said something about there was a discussion about looking at the regional agreement, revisiting the regional agreement, rewriting it. That was in the paper. I just wondered what the context of
Yeah, we
that.
talked about, so we have that, the regional school district has it on our list of goals for the year. We don't have specific plans other than to look at because it's old and we should review it.
Okay.
It's,
But
takes
old
an
is not a
extra
bad thing in
change it,
an
but-
agreement. It's not like a policy where you have to revisit it all the time, right? If it's working, what aspect of it would be revised? Is there,
that's my question, Dave.
right, you
I
don't
know.
review an old agreement just because it's old if it's working. Then you have to go through a whole recertification. It seems like a silly
Yeah,
exercise.
I think one might argue that the what we were just talking about, the way we allocate the budget,
Oops.
based on enrollment, we could
Oops.
change that formula
Oops,
and make,
that doesn't sound good.
Why would we want
Why would we want that, right?
so the one idea is to change it, so we do it every year based on the October 1st enrollment. We could do it every 3 years, let's say, to have a more predictable stream, right?
I mean, come on, it's just math, really.
Believe me, I have the exact same reaction as you guys. Like, what are we doing this for? And that's the only reason I've heard.
Furthermore, any changes year to year would be much greater on the Carlisle side since we're a smaller percentage.
Well, that's why they want
Yep.
to try to,
That's why they're trying to position it to
they'll
look.
like grab a
you know,
high
good.
point and lock it down. It's like freezing your mortgage rate, right? So, what's the protocol if you make a change? I presume it has to be voted by both towns at town meeting, right?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond that. I think you got to do something at the state level.
So
I don't know.
can you please use your powers of persuasion to get these guys off that line?
I've tried and failed because it's one of our goals for the year is to review it.
Well, review it is okay. Change it is not okay. Do they understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Okay.
I get
Well,
it.
please
If they're
do
gonna
what you
reread it.
can. Please do what you can, and educate Christine if you can to make sure she's.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal to me because I think
So,
that's just not going to have a good outcome. Okay.
So let me just say, to me, that is an issue for the town of Carlisle and the regional school district. And I recognize that people in Carlisle look to the Carlisle School Committee for guidance on these things, but there's not a whole lot that involves the Carlisle School Committee here.
No, it's not, I'm asking you as a friend and a representative who sits on the regional school committee to use the power of your influence on the region. I fully recognize I have zero influence on that debate.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I'm just saying, this is one of those line items where I might not update the committee because I don't
Oh,
see it
yeah,
as a...
well, no, it's useful. I
Right.
think, no, I actually, let me push back on that because, on that Warren article it came up too. And I will quote Louis Salemi, who usually watches these broadcasts and might not like that I named him, but he had a very valid point. And the point was, voters, when it comes time to vote our budget right here in Carlisle, they don't always parse, in fact, even in our own budget, right? Education is a line item and there's a subline, but, education is a block. And if the region soaks up a higher growth rate, which I'm hearing, even at our 25%, if it's a higher growth rate, that may put an undue burden on us here, where people lump us together and say, well, geez, the schools are getting 4 or 5%. Like, no, we're not, but we've lost the argument, so that, I think that's a material issue. Go ahead.
Well, I was going from the other side of things. If FinCom says, across the board, we can support, 2.5% across everything, and 1/3 is this, 1/3 is region, 1/3 is rest of town.
Yeah.
And region takes 4.5.
Yeah, it leaves.
What does that mean for everything else, including this district?
Well, that's flip side,
It's just-
same argument. So anyway, I think it is material to us, and you're our rep, as you said, so please rep on.
Okay, will do.
All right.
Thank you.
Melinda, you want to say anything? Transportation, nothing? Ubers are zipping around?
You decided to go with looking at a pilot, looking at one
Both.
of those models, using
Okay,
Uber
okay.
and Lyft.
And that's for
For the Chana 15
the
grant.
Right, okay. And Josh? We kind of covered
We
the,
got to get our long-term capital ducks in a row for this district.
right.
Get
So-
a request ready. I expect Scott is now the chair of long-term capital.
Are you-
Expect to.
We're connecting.
You're
Okay.
connecting, okay, good. Yeah, we did float, so building on that, sort of a muddled middle ground in terms of capital projects for us, but besides the technology thing, the parking lot is a perennial favorite, but now it's sort of paired up with the potential solar project.
Yeah, he didn't look favorable when I asked him about that. I don't know. if there
Well,
was a
I
discussion.
went to the Board of Selectmen meeting last night because the Energy Task Force was to present the plans and the Board of Selectmen was to vote on, I guess, approving go forward. And unfortunately, in a scheduling issue for me personally, I showed up at my appointed time and they were entering the deer hunting debate. And that is like a town meeting in itself, right?
Yeah.
So it went on and on and on, and I couldn't wait and I had to leave. But I spoke to Bill Rizzo there, and I guess my feeling, they're gonna propose, my understanding, I guess they would have proposed by now, the municipal site that they already control, right? The town transfer station, I mean, it's already town land, so
Oh,
they can decide to move out on RFQ on that.
on the rooftop of the DPW?
I guess wherever.
Well, there are two different things going on, but.
Okay, but there's a site.
Yeah,
But
so
then there's the
I'm
two
driving that
school
one.
sites that they've thought about, which if they were to move forward, they have to come through us. So,
My understanding is, on these things, that there's state grants
yeah,
that used to be yearly, but are now being moved to every other year.
yeah,
The next time money's being given out is January 2020.
right.
To get in queue for a January 2020 grant, you got to have your applications in roughly September 2019.
Yeah,
If, there's no limit on the number of projects we can put in, but all the projects that go in are prioritized according to which make the most sense
right.
at a state level. So we could have 3 projects approved. We don't have to decide amongst them ourselves.
No, and I agree with you, and that's, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. You're right, they may propose 3 or 4, actually, I think they're gonna propose 4 projects. And they may have again last night. What I'm saying is the 2 of those 4 projects, 2 are school grounds projects. the parking lot and the slope. And all I said, really, I wanted to hear it so I could be informed today, but I'm obviously not. But what I asked Bill Rizzo, and there's a guy, Zook is the chair, I think,
Yeah.
there's a new guy who's the chair, is we will put you on this for you, Nancy, we'll put you on the agenda for December, assuming you're approved to go the next step. Please present to us what you got in mind, right? And I think we see. Now, there's an understanding that if they did if we all agreed to move forward on the school parking lot, that we would roll the cost of paving into that. That would be a whole project. It may lower the return to the town, but net, it's the same as if you wouldn't put a brand new bunch of canopies on the oldie moldy parking lot, right?
Yeah, but it would force the town to, we couldn't get a grant to repave the parking lot, even if it were part of that project. It would force the town to spend the money to
No,
pave
they'd spend the
parking lot.
money, but they have to. They can't approve the point being, they couldn't say, yeah, that sounds great, the returns are great, and by the way, school, you gotta pave the parking lot before we do it. We'll say, we ain't doing that. So they have to, if they want that project, in my opinion, they also need to take on paving, because you can't do it without paving.
It still would be a town long-term capital.
Yes, it's a town, thank you, a town long-term capital, perfectly said. It's not a school coming and saying, please, I want the responsibility to do it to rest with the people who want to put a canopy over the parking lot. That's what I'm saying. Maybe that's selfish, but.
Ultimately, the question's gonna come, school, do you need a new parking lot? What's the status of it? Is it really needed?
We would say maybe we do, maybe we don't. But you can't put.
Okay, be careful with that answer though, because if the answer is we need one in 10 years, then it was, when the solar project doesn't go ahead, come back in 10 years for your parking lot paving.
Oh, yeah, no, that's okay, right? But I don't know what the life is, but it's not a next year. We're not going out with a paving project with that.
We can't if we're waiting for solar to be approved.
Right, that's
We're
right.
going to get the money till January 2020 at the
I
earliest.
think that's right, okay. So that's that one. The other project they're proposing is, they might propose, is that slopey area, and we would have to see specifics about that, right?
So they would propose they take down all those trees?
You know, I don't want to answer for them. That's why they need to come in and tell us what they have in mind.
Didn't they?
Tennis courts?
Well, they did once a long time
I
ago.
think they're talking about the walk from behind,
Yeah.
from the school down to Spalding Field. Is that
I
what
think
they're
that's
talking
what they're talking about. But I don't want to, they need to come and tell us what they have in mind. I think that's the other tell us what you have in mind conversation is with Council on Aging, who did get, and I think RecCom's involved, which did get a Chinook grant to evaluate a community center.
Feasibility study.
Feasibility study for a community center. And what they decided to do was not, they liked the Goff property, but they expanded the scope of the RFQ of this study to allow them to look at more than the Goff property. There's not enough money to fully examine 2 sites, but they have the flexibility to decide. So Jerry Lerman's been asking me, what does the school committee just think? And I should say the second site that they like is Spalding. Now Spalding has a lot of needs, and it's a tiny patch of land. So
The field?
well, a piece of the field. I'm not putting any endorsement or unendorsement on it, but that's a highly needed piece of land, right? So again, same thing. I said, listen, we can't, you need to come in. If that's a serious candidate, you need to come in and meet with the committee. So that is also, at least as of today, I've asked him to prepare that presentation for the December meeting. Because the reason he's a little bit on a timeline because he's getting this RFQ done, and what he said is if it's an absolute non-starter, I'm not going to waste any time or money on it. But I don't want to answer, I can't answer for the committee. The committee needs to hear what he has to say. That's my opinion.
There are other pieces of land in town that have been talked about.
But that's not our job. Yes, we talked about it, and I wrote an email to one guy, I won't say who it is, and I got a very rejection of the proposal of a particular site. So they seem to be liking the Goff property, and now they've looked at Spalding, and all I said was, if you're serious about Spalding, please come in, present it, and then we are unlikely to take a vote on it till another meeting, but, at least you can start that process.
There is one thing I probably should let the committee know about. Council on Aging and potentially others have started using Highland for storage.
Okay? Really?
Yes, really.
Where do they store
Well,
it?
that was authorized by Tim Godwin, correct?
The basement?
Yeah.
The Board of Selectmen.
Is it our building or their?
Well, it's their building, it's our land.
And the Boy Scouts are outfitting it for their,
We're also getting a quote, there's all sorts of numbers been thrown around, a quote, what would it take to sprinkler it, since Chief Flannery is very interested in having that building sprinklered, not because he's worried about that building, but because he says if that goes up, there's no way to protect Robbins. So we've talked about, gee, it's small money, it's big money, it's ready, it's not ready. So we're just going to go get a quote, what's it going to cost? And design
Who's we?
Facilities committee.
Okay.
So that's what we're talking about now.
Okay.
It's not sprinkled right now?
No.
Is there something laid from the pump house to?
Yes.
So it's not sprinkled?
No.
Oh, that's surprising.
Which limits its storage uses, but also presents
It's brick, right?
long-term concern.
It's a brick or wood?
No, it's wood.
It's wood.
It's wood.
And-
No, that's not good.
And balloon frame, too.
Yeah, that's not good. All right. Well, I think we should, I guess.
That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, okay, all right. I think we got it. So how about warrants? You want to report out warrants, Susan?
Nancy has the list, but I've added two. Nancy?
Yeah, there's.
Do we have to read them into the record, or can we just say
I
they're...
think
They're
we
in
can
there.
say
They're
the
in
ones-
there.
We need to read them.
We don't need to read them.
But I think we have to read the ones that aren't there.
That aren't there.
Because there were two that were signed yesterday.
Okay.
Accounts payable warrant number 3519 for $98,412.63, and payroll warrant number 3319 for $377,431.43, in addition to
Okay.
the other ones that are already listed.
All right. And action items. So, residency policy, we've gone through this a few times, and I think the addition that was recommended by Mike Gilbert was just to say student enrollment, if a determination is made that the student does not actually reside in the town of Carlisle, the student's enrollment will be terminated in a reasonable amount of time, as opposed to the next week or whatever we said last time.
Walk them out of the building.
Right. Or what? And everything else, I think we've kind of debated around. Did I miss anything on that?
No, does that change? No.
Well, you made the change.
Yeah, okay.
So it's changed. So I would entertain a motion to approve the residency policy as in the packet.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call vote?
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye?
Koblotsky, aye.
Doors, aye.
Very good. Evaluation policy, I don't think there was there any comment last time when we did it? I don't recall. So
And I
if...
did check those references, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so motion to approve the approve the evaluation policy.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, well, in the policy on evaluation, we reference the salary increases for non-contractual service personnel.
We do?
Yeah.
Where?
Where's that?
Read the last.
Oh, okay.
Is that necessary?
That's a good point. Good call. Performance reviews. No, the
That's a
heading is
performance
performance reviews and salary increases. That just happens to be
That's the title of the section.
The title of the
that it's
section.
referring to in the policy for non-contractual service. That's the headline or the,
Can we limit our policy to the performance review part of that section
Well, yeah, we would do.
and not
But it's...
not codify that our policy is whatever salary increase? Is that a...
No, but
It's just saying it's gonna follow the
you'd have to
process
rewrite
outlined.
that, you'd have to rewrite
The handbook,
where is that policy?
it's in the non-contractual personnel handbook.
Well, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say it's in the handbook, but is it, it says for staff, the policy. Or is it,
That's the name of the handbook, isn't it?
That is the name of the handbook?
Policy for non-contractual service personnel.
Okay.
Is that the name of the thing they're given? That's their kind of handbook?
Can we note, when we bring that handbook up for review next time?
do we review that? I don't think
It's hardly been reviewed, but it's usually been internal.
So the previous paragraph, the second paragraph states, conforms to the most recent version of the school committee approved or adopted plans as follows. And then it lists this,
Okay.
which implies that the school
Yeah.
committee has approved or adopted it.
so we
Which-
better review it.
We ought to review it. And when we review it, can we take a look at that section? Because we're now referencing in another policy.
Okay. So, Nancy, why don't you put that one up for review next time?
I'm just putting the interest non-con handbooks on the business office site, so if you want to look at it.
Oh, she'll send it out.
Yeah. All right. Any other discussion? We have a motion on the table to
There's a
approve.
link. Send a link to it.
Yeah.
Do you wish to table this until we review that?
I think we're referencing it, we can change it.
We can always change it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because people can click.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote to approve.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Kablotsky, aye.
Doors aye.
Okay. And finally, superintendent goals. I doubt we need to revisit them one more time, so entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent goals as presented.
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call vote.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Kablotsky, aye.
Doors aye.
Excellent. Okay.
Yes, the committee something. Would you consider waiving the waiting period and vote on the discard?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, then we can move them right along.
Okay.
Well, what about the proposal? Oh, you have to, you have to approve in order
We
to...
first have to vote to discard.
I move first to waive our usual practice of bringing up an item at one meeting and not voting on it until the next in order to take up the urgent matter of the disposal of technology equipment.
Do we have to first vote on the waiver and then we vote on the...
Yes.
Okay. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Kablotsky, aye.
Doors aye.
Okay, now,
I now move that we authorize the surplus of equipment as detailed in the meeting packet.
Second.
discussion. Roll call vote.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Kablotsky, aye.
Doors aye.
All right, very good. Other business. There remain three citizens. Any citizen comments?
Just a comment, I think you meant Vance Davis, not Spalding?
No, I wish I did.
Well, all the reports I find is always referenced Vance Davis.
For the rec center?
Right, the community center.
I don't want to misspeak.
So I've never seen anything about the wetlands, helping the wetlands. Have you-
I understand, I
and the
understand.
Town conservation.
That was what,
Everything that I've read about previously has always been Vance Davis, so. just make
well,
it
I can read you from Jerry. Hi, David. At tomorrow's meeting, will the school committee be discussing use of Spalding Field as a possible site for the community center? And I said, well, do you want a formal thing? And,
You
et
might
cetera.
have misspoke perhaps? Because
What's that?
The reports that I see have always said,
Okay.
I mean, Spalding and Vance Davis are next to each other. so-
Well, I understand that, but
They're very different.
No, it was,
Yes.
there was a meeting. We were at that meeting, right?
the meeting was on the 11th, and they referenced something was coming out on the 12th.
No, but I mean, you
But
and
the
I met with
conversation was
them, and
Spalding.
the conversation was about Spalding. Now, do they have any plans? I don't know. So
Wow,
they need to come. They need to come and tell us.
that's the first I've heard this, and I
Okay.
don't see anything in the paper about it. Just-
Well, I don't know that they have really a plan. I mean, I don't know. I really
If you're
don't.
doing your research, they said there was a conversation probably on the 10th, maybe the night before, October 10th.
of October?
Yeah, and they
Okay.
thought it was gonna be, something was gonna be made
It's-
public
it-
on the 12th. Remember, that was the gist
You
of
know,
the
I-
conversation.
Over a month ago, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and they may have backed away. I think part of it, again, I really don't want to overcharge this thing. They got the China money, and they have time to run a feasibility study, and they're doing an RFQ right now, RFP, I guess. And so they decided to not restrict themselves to Goff. Whether this is one of 3 sites, 2 sites, I don't know. But they do know that if Jerry doesn't want to waste his time if it's a non-starter with us. I don't want to speak, I can't speak for the committee by myself, so I said, you need to come in, but you can't tell me like the day before that you need to come in. Like, come in a month from now. So, I haven't heard him, no, I shouldn't say. If the school committee could make a decision about Spalding Field at their December meeting, then we could examine either Goff or Spalding towards the end of the study.
So
But I
we don't-
told him, I think, that we wouldn't do that.
So if we're not even presented until December, how are we supposed to make a meeting, make a
We
decision in
wouldn't.
December?
I told him we wouldn't. We would take it up in January. So, but that's his problem, right? I mean, that's his problem. He should have figured out what our calendar is and have pinged us, a couple weeks ago. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I think we need, Nancy, we need to just make a mental note, and I'll reach back to him in December. But, if they're serious, they need to come and tell us.
Yeah, I want to let RecCom know about that.
You want, what did you say?
You might want to let RecCom know about that.
No,
If it's
about
on the
what?
agenda.
That they're on the agenda?
Well, I
If
mean,
doing something with Spalding is on the agenda.
No, he wasn't, Drew was at that,
Recreation Department?
Drew was there, wasn't he?
Well, there's a member of the rec
Jerry got the
on that,
information from Drew.
on that
Yeah.
community center committees. They're aware of the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, but, I mean, your point's well taken, and I will make a note to just reach out to Drew, to let him know. But I need to really hear from Jerry that he's, I don't know.
Well, the primary property that's being looked at is the Goff property. The
Right.
Chinook grant for the feasibility study is a small amount of money. It doesn't really lend itself to.
They don't have enough
looking
to
at-
do.
Right.
So they're
and-
likely to just
And the
do
feasibility
that.
study is primarily focused on building use and design and some of the features of the property itself, but primarily the architecture and the, use of the building, so.
I don't know.
So, it's only.
I mean, have a drink of water, Mary. I think,
I don't know if we don't need to make a thing, it's not.
Sorry.
it's not, yeah, I mean, it's right.
Yeah, if they
It's
come
not-
and talk to us, then it's a
Okay.
discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
Otherwise, it's.
So I would like to start by congratulating, committee of policy. I'd like to start by congratulating the teachers, even in absentia, because they already left, for the great results that the 2 principals have presented. And those great results are not only in MCAS, which is a very difficult test, but I see them every day in my children. I think we have teachers that do an exceptional job. And I personally feel privileged to have my children taught by outstanding cadre of professionals. I'm not sure that the school committee would be in the position of commenting on the current teacher contract negotiations, but contradict me if I'm wrong. Are we in the position to comment?
No.
Are you? No, you're not. And I understand that. I'm familiar with contract negotiations, but I would like to urge the school committee and the community as a whole, actually, to consider how much of an asset teachers are. That's one point I would like to make. Secondly, many school districts, if not all, in Massachusetts, I didn't check the very small ones like ourselves, do have teacher salary scales posted. So I think that may be public information, despite my best efforts.
Do you have what, I'm sorry?
Teacher salary
Salary.
scales.
It is.
They're posted.
It is
Probably,
public.
Yeah, but then I have difficulty navigating the site, the Carlisle Public School site. That's-
I don't think it's.
That's not-
It's at a state level.
Desi.
Okay. But I haven't seen the old one either, the 15, 18, I haven't seen it. So that's my point. The majority.
But it's
of school
posted.
districts-
It's publicly available. DESE has it. We reported to them. There are multiple media outlets have described average and peak teacher salaries across districts across the state and located our position within that spectrum.
I appreciate your comment, Mr. Pawlowski, and I'm a statistician. So there is a very significant difference between average, range, and so on.
Okay.
I'm sure you're familiar
My dear,
with
it's 10:18, and I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion about
It's not-
statistics and what's posted and not.
It's about
Please refer to the DESE website, and
publicly
that information
available
is there.
information.
Yes.
It's not only average, it's an actual teacher salary scale.
Public information is on the DESE website. I urge you to explore the website, and then if you have issues, let us know. But first, please look at the website. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other comments? I would like to move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to MGL, et cetera. Do I have to read the whole thing?
Yeah, for purposes 3 and 7.
For purposes 3 and 7.
So moved.
Anybody second?
Second?
Dave, I think you should read the whole thing.
Okay.
I move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, with no intent to return to open session for the following purposes. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation of an open meeting may have detrimental effect on bargaining or litigating position of the public body. And purpose 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or specific law or federal grant and aid requirements. Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, 23B, Sections 1 through 7. General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 22G. Consideration of release of executive session minutes from previous meetings.
Josh,
Nancy, you wrote that?
Wow. Well, since you put it that way, Josh, I don't know.
Second.
Yes, second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Gambino, aye.
Modell, aye.
Pawlowski, aye.
Doors eyes.
So moved. Thank you, everybody.